Tēnā koutou katoa. Welcome everybody, and welcome to those who are watching us from live stream today for the Performance and Monitoring Committee, where we look closer at Council's activities for the last quarter and receive reports as we will today. I'd like Councillor Hickey, please, if you could open with a karakia.
Tēnei te mihi ki a koe te siamana koutou te waka taima nei, tēnei waka hoa kina I te karakia. Tūtau mai runga, tūtau mai raro, tūtau mai waho, tūtau mai roto. Kia tū ai te mauri tū, te mauri ora ki te katoa. Hau mie, hui e, tai. Kia ora tātou.
Thank you, Councillor Hickey. We've got move on to apologies and leaves of absence. So an apology from Councillor Kerr, who's at the Hawke's Bay Airport annual general meeting. Councillor T.R. Skipworth has also been granted leave of absence. Councillor Barrow will leave today early to attend a funeral, and Councillor Jessup also will be attending, leaving today at 9:50 a.m. Is there any leave of absences that people would like to apply for, please? No? Right, could I have a mover, please, for the apologies? Councillor Watkins, and seconded Councillor Sholem. All those in favour? Say aye. Thank you. Conflicts of interest, the usual story. Please declare as we're going through. Minutes of the last meeting, which is the 19th of September 2024, as circulated. If there's no questions regarding those, can I have a mover, please? Councillor Dixon. Seconder, Councillor Sholem. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Right. So I'd like to welcome to the table. We're going to do the Food East annual report first. Michael Bassett-Foss, Nikki Solomon and Tony Gray. Michael is the Chief Executive, Nikki's the Board Chair, and Tony Gray is the Board Member. So they're going to do a 10-minute presentation. If you'd like to come to the front, please. And I'm going to do a Simon today, which is Simon's our council timekeeper, so I've learnt from the master. So we've got a bit to go through, so we'll keep it 10 minutes today. So if I'm not correct, Simon will no doubt tell me. So.
Kia ora koutou, ko Nikki Solomon taku ingoa. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak to you this morning. We will be speaking to our annual report, but that's obviously quite retrospective, covering the year to the end of June, and we've made enormous progress in the months since then. So Michael will give a brief presentation, and then we'd really like to take the opportunity for discussion and questions and exploring our opportunities and challenges with you all. So I'll hand over to Michael to give the presentation. Happy to take questions as we go or at the end, whatever you like. And yeah, over to you, Michael.
Kia ora, Nikki. Kia ora tātou. We've only got about 5 slides. I will rattle through them quite quickly. A lot of the information is in the annual report, plus we've flavoured it with sort of the last activity over the last quarter as well. So it was a year of transition. Last time we were here, we were still in construction phase. That transition's actually accelerated over the last 6 months with the opening of Food East on the 1st of, the informal opening on the 1st of July, which is when our first tenant started. And we're well and truly open for business now. I think this week we've got 4 or 5 events down there, and it's just great to see the place being used and trucks pulling up across the other side in the industrial area. And the revenues for last year are in the annual report. The only revenues were from the revaluation of the buildings since our first tenant didn't start till the 1st of July. And the board has been extremely focused on expenses and just managing costs, and so the costs were quite well down on budget last year, and that ongoing focus continues just for around prudent financial management. The Q1 revenues, 24k against a budget of 28. You can see the tenant revenue coming in and some of the event hire space, and again, the expenses down on budget as we manage that. And we're slowly developing our innovation agenda. The board, right from the outset, took advice from other similar hubs around the country and has taken on the mantra of get busy, then get smart. You know, don't do the smart front up at the start. Make sure you get tenants in there and you get busy and operational, and then introduce the smarter stuff as we go. Big focus on the commercial plan. You know, we're not hiding from the fact it's a damn tough leasing market out there, and you know, damn tough for a lot of players in the economy, full stop. Finding that due diligence takes time. Currently in Building A, we've got about 21% committed with people in, and in Building B, 75% committed. 4 tenants currently confirmed. The 4th one starts in a couple of weeks' time, comes into residence. The interesting bit there is the due diligence. Another 50% of the space is under due diligence by 2 potential tenants in Building A. And, you know, it'll be a challenge to land them both, but it just shows that there's green shoots in the property market and people coming to really scratch the surface of what Food East has to offer. And we'll just acknowledge too that the tenant mix will evolve over time. You know, it'll evolve to some anchor tenants with some startups sort of coming through and occupying space. We've also just sort of looked around for sectors of opportunity and what really makes up, you know, the Hawke's Bay economy, and we see a lot of activity in the agri-tech space and a bit of a void around cluster and cohesive activity. So we're starting to investigate stepping into that a lot more heavily, and we've done a deep dive around the industry in the fermentation space. A lot of sort of venture capital money around the world is flowing into the fermentation space, the future of food, you know, new generation proteins. We see a huge gap in the New Zealand market, so we're going to run pretty hard at this. The partners we've spoken at are supportive right around the country of us sort of leaning into this space, and we've got a regional infrastructure fund expression of interest in with Kānoa, just to help activate that facility, and we're partway through a business case development on that, and really thank the council for supporting us with Sustainable is Attainable. You've been on that journey for a good 3 years now. It's got 50 odd companies actively involved, sitting around the table, sharing their opportunities and their challenges and exploring ways where they can work together. And some of these companies are the biggest, you know, in Hawke's Bay. So it's significant around of value add that, you know, Food East is now, with support of Hastings District Council, has taken up the mantra on. And considering our pitch to corporate partners to bolster our revenue streams and the events program. In the innovation space, so we've sort of got the commercial space and the innovation space, 2 pillars that we focus on. We've spoken about Sustainable is Attainable and the strong interest coming there. We talk with our colleagues in the Food Innovation Network right across New Zealand, because we are part of a larger network both nationally and globally. And looking for, again, chances to work together around areas of activity. One interest they've got at the moment is being able to describe their impact around their innovation activity, and that's an area that we are exploring at the moment. We're probably more advanced actually, so I think they'll be able to leverage some of our work on that. I've talked about agri-tech focus and our events program rapidly growing, and those last 2 bullet points around industry assessment and the measurement and reporting framework is a place we've stepped into right at the moment, and the board at their meeting next week we'll look at a scoping document around how we will frame that up, and over time those measures will actually sit in our statement of intent more strongly, so we balance both commercial drivers and our innovation drivers, and we can report against them. My last slide is just looking forward. I've talked about our focusing on tenants and the commercial plan, fermentation, agri-tech, the innovation agenda. We're going to have our formal opening in about 3 weeks' time, 4 weeks' time. and there'll be the minister here and a ribbon cutting event down at Food East. So we're really looking forward to that opportunity to celebrate alongside the limited partners, including Hastings District Council and other key stakeholders that have been on this very long journey towards, opening a food innovation hub in Hawke's Bay, which was seen as a gap in the market. Our website it's going through a redevelopment, and we'll be able to help amplify the stories of food and beverage in Hawke's Bay and across the country. And key matters that are really, on the mind of the board are, again, the commercial strategy and really using that to drive funding for the innovation agenda. The sort of the balancing act with being commercially sustainable over time with funding an innovation agenda which costs money is the bit that we're walking through at the moment. I've talked about the measurement framework, which is important for us, and in our funding agreement with Kānoa through our statement of intent, and ongoing focus on stakeholder support and industry engagement. So that's my very quick run through the slides.
Thank you, Michael, for your presentation. Any questions for the team from Food East? Everybody missed a very good presentation, Michael. That's very oh no, we've got a question. I was stopped in my tracks. Here we go. Councillor Corbyn.
My question's about the fermentation hub. Will that see lab facilities or pilot facilities established there?
That is an excellent question. Our sort of exploration has shown that there's a gap in the space that is lab facilities and is the sort of scale up and pilot. We've got one of our foundation tenants is a company called Marabio, which is a local startup in the fermentation space. So we're working with them to figure out what they need as a next step, which is probably a lab, and anticipating that might be kind of a containerised lab in one of the bays. And because it would be a microbiology lab, it's quite generic, which again is a kind of risk mitigation strategy that should they not need it anymore, there would be other businesses that would. And we're also exploring, Michael's heading to Massey next week, I think, to talk to the Reddit Centre over there, which is spawning startups in the space. And we've had an online conversation with them about what could we do that would be useful for them, and to the extent that they might even have some bits of kit kicking around that we could locate. So we're just exploring the space with them as well. What we don't want to do is something that someone else is already able to do, but making sure that we understand the gap to fill. So probably in the first instance it is the lab, the small scale stuff, but with an aspiration maybe to move into the pilot space, which is obviously more expensive, bigger kit, more requirements. So we see it as being, again, a journey and a kind of sensible risk management journey, but there's definitely a space there for us to understand and to potentially fill.
Thank you. Councillor Sholem.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for your presentation and the annual report. I just note within the annual report that it mentions that construction cost escalations have eaten into operational funding somewhat, which has shortened your runway, with an additional $400,000 required by Q4 2025. I'm just really interested to understand what strategies are being considered to address that gap. How is that funding going to be found? Yeah, if you could elaborate on that, that would be wonderful.
Sure. So I'll start and Tony can step in because he's more of the commercial mind than me. But we have, as I think Michael alluded to, we have an innovation strategy and a commercial strategy, and the two are intricately linked because innovation is not a money-making activity. So our ability to deliver on the innovation mandate depends on us getting the commercial stuff right. So obviously the foundation commercial activity is tenanting the building because we continue to bleed money until, that's full. But meantime, we're exploring potential commercial partnerships, things like naming rights, and we see the opportunity with this fermentation space, again, to pitch our place in the world, because at the moment we need to know what we are and what we have to offer potential corporate sponsors or similar. So that's, again, I feel like Tony's itching to say something here. So. But we kind of feel like that is an important place we could play, that then we have something to offer corporate partners to say, sponsor this amazing opportunity to really be the centre of the future of food company. But I'll let Tony.
Yeah, the actual commercial plan is obviously critical to the delivery, if you like, of what we need to deliver for Food East. All the advice we've had to date basically says just be careful in the timing of going to market and make sure you've got something to market and sell as part of that. And two parts of that, which you've already alluded to, have a decent amount of tenants in there so it's not empty, so it's more attractive. But secondly, have something which is going to be appeal to them. Could be the fermentation project, could be AgTech, they can actually put in as part of that pitch that someone can be associated with. I'm hopeful that we can actually end up going to market early first quarter next year, put a pitch together and go to corporates and look at sponsorship and all sorts of other things associated with that. But to me, it's critical. And we need that funding to fund the innovation sort of side of the business.
Thank you, if I may. Just one of the questions I did have was around reporting frameworks looking at outside of financial performance. So it was really great to hear you touch on that. And it might not be the appropriate forum today, but I'd certainly be interested in more information as that evolves, because I think you're right. You're touching on the fact that this is meant to be this commercial and then the innovation side and the impact that has to our economy locally as well. So just throwing that out there.
And sorry, I'll take the talking step back. I think that, 100% really keen to continue to explore that conversation. It's a really interesting one in terms of, I'm really excited by the work that Michael's commissioned to help us understand, how we can be impactful, how we measure that impact. And as you say, I think that we all absolutely committed to being more than just a building, and so that's why we're driving these two things in parallel. And I think, being the home of sustainable as attainable gives us a real chance to connect with businesses, understand how we add value to them, understand what we could do that would add more value. And I think that that's kind of the direction of travel, is to continue to engage with businesses, small to large, and understand what Food East could be to them, and then figure out how we could be that. But it's a great conversation to continue to have. Happy to chat anytime.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Nikki, Michael and Tony, for coming along. And I know the councillors that went enjoyed the tour that Michael took us on of Food East. It's an amazing facility. So if you're listening on live stream and want some space, I think we all appreciate how difficult it is, and I think we've got a large degree of confidence that you're paddling the Waka pretty hard in the circumstances. So thank you very much. We've got to receive a report. Could I please have a mover for that? Councillor Hickey, and a seconder, Councillor Harvey. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you all. Thank you. Right, I'd like to invite Alistair and Lucy from the Regional Economic Development Agency, READA, to have their presentation. Welcome, Alistair and Lucy.
Thank you, Chair. Morning, everyone. I'm Alistair McLeod, as some of you know. There's Lucy, my CEO, and we're here to give our 6-monthly update. I'm going to start by saying we're pleased that last week Council signed off our funding agreement. This, of course, deals with the period through to 30 June 2025. Our board will be approving our annual accounts in early December and then presenting them to Matariki on 13 December, after which they'll be presented to councils. Shortly, Lucy will be giving an update on the findings of our research projects, which we've had running for some time, and then we'll speak on the other work that we're doing and what's in the pipeline. Before I hand over to Lucy, I did just want to talk briefly about the elephant in the room, which is the review of regional architecture, which is currently being undertaken by Matariki and very much supported by Hastings District Council. We'll obviously be participating in that process, but I just wanted to give some comments to you as a group, because this will be probably the only chance we'll get to do this. I've been involved in regional economic development work for the last quarter of a century. I was a partner in Deloitte. I ran that part of Deloitte nationwide, and when I took early retirement and came up to Hawke's Bay, I got dragged in to try and rescue the regional economic development strategy work at that point. That was back in 2014. We got fairly aggressively challenged by local Māori on the fact that we had very, very poor engagement. So we basically ripped up everything that had been done prior to that and started again. And I am still immensely proud of the fact that the Hawke's Bay Regional Economic Development Strategy is the only one, it was certainly the first one in the history of New Zealand, that was both Māori and non-Māori combined. We got massive engagement and support across the entire region. And once we delivered that, I kind of backed out because I was also chair of the port and we had a bunch of other things to focus on. But I got re-engaged probably 3 years ago, and I just got so frustrated at the lack of progress that convened a group of business leaders and tried to get some progress to create a regional economic development agency. That led to the formation of the Hawke's Bay REDA. It has genuine multicultural support, certainly bicultural support. We have a very wide range of shareholders. And it took a long time to get going. It is starting to get traction with business. We have fabulous engagement with Māori across the entire region. And my one plea to all of you is that we don't, for about the 15th time, throw everything out and start again, because we will destroy an enormous amount of goodwill in that process. And, you know, I got involved because I passionately believe in the vision that every household and every whānau should be actively engaged in and benefit from a thriving Hawke's Bay economy. And we can't afford to let that go. That's why my board got involved. So we've been very focused on having a very deliberate approach to partnership. And my plea is, please don't lose this in whatever outcome comes out of this review. So with that, fairly impassioned beginning, I'm going to hand over to Lucy.
Kia ora koutou. Good to see you all again. I think I was here in April, and in April we'd only been around for about 6 months, and I was talking you through our process to get a letter of expectation agreed and signed by Matariki on behalf of all of the 14 shareholders, and then kick off our sort of foundational piece of work really, which is this piece of research into the Hawke's Bay economy. So I'll give you an update on that. We're coming to the end of that. So we went out for an RFP and we took on Infometrics and Martin Jenkins in a partnership. Infometrics is really good at the quantitative side, Martin Jenkins on the qualitative side. So since July, Infometrics did the first piece of work, which you've seen, which was just a high-level review of the last 5 years of the economy. Some really interesting findings in there. And then Martin Jenkins has been leading a process to go out and interview about 70 PSGEs, councils, and obviously mostly businesses. I've been part of many of those interviews, and it's been a really good way to really understand under the hood what's going on in Hawke's Bay. We've particularly focused industries that are not just the traditional horticulture or mainstay industries of Hawke's Bay, but looking in the developing and emerging space based on the data that was provided by Infometrics. So just to give you a really high-level update, because we'll be releasing the research in December, what we've found is that the rebound from the cyclone and flooding has been faster and more positive for many than expected. Some industries and areas are doing it tough, like the SMEs, particularly in horticulture, tourism and forestry, and Wairoa in general is obviously doing really tough. You obviously, as local government, have quite a different view, I would think, because of your enormous burden of roading and other costs related to the cyclone. But we've been really quite surprised that a lot of businesses have been almost quite nonchalant about it. Economic conditions more widely are more of an issue. So the downturn in China, the downturn in domestic demand and the cost of capital, which is shared across the country. Obviously, we were looking particularly for opportunities and challenges at a Hawke's Bay level. So these are just some of the high-level findings. There's a significant link to what they call ecosystem in the region associated with food production, which will be no surprise to any of you, and particularly to our foodies friends. So we've got the primary suppliers, the processors, the equipment manufacturers, and the solution providers all working in this really interesting and quite clever ecosystem. There's a really good level of investment in tech across all industries, even industries that you might think are pretty old-fashioned. They're investing in automation and robotics and other bits and pieces because of what we'll get to, labour difficulties in the labour market in particular. Family connections have been the major reason that businesses have been established in Hawke's Bay and remain in the region. And that almost every single business we've met, there's been the partner or the person that established it is from Hawke's Bay or has strong linkages to Hawke's Bay. And that has actually, we think, led to a really high engagement in the research. Out of the many companies that we've asked to talk to, only less than a handful have said that they don't want to be engaged. And our researchers have said they've never seen this across anywhere they've worked. There's a real passion for Hawke's Bay, a bit of resignation about the role of EDAs, as Alistair said. We've had a lot of people involved over the years that say, well, I hope that you guys were still here to carry this work on. But that linkage to family is something that we need to really think through, because there's very few businesses that just choose out of a region. We want to go to Hawke's Bay because it's sunny. In fact, research, and I might have said this last time I was here, research shows that companies don't move for sunshine. People move for sunshine and good lifestyle, but companies generally locate around a region where there's good transportation networks and access to labour and so on. There are exceptions like Luke and his wife who came down to move Fingermark down to Hawke's Bay. They really were looking to get out of Auckland and find a place to live, and they liked the school and opportunities here. But that's not the case for most businesses, so it's something for us to really keep in mind. In saying that, we've had feedback that the roads are good enough, the port's good, there's an airport, connections are not too bad, the weather's good, the schools are good. There's a real risk of manufacturing heading offshore in the coming years, and that's already happening for many of the businesses that we've talked to. But at this stage, there is a commitment to R&D and finishing in Hawke's Bay. So they might do the upfront work, send their product overseas to get it manufactured more cheaply. Often it's sent back to New Zealand, packaged up, marketed and sent off overseas. And that's generally related to labour costs and input costs like electricity and water and so on. Roading and skills availability are the most common challenges across all the sectors that we've talked to. Water and energy costs are affecting those heavy users. General feedback on local government is local government's role, reduce barriers, please, they all say. Reduce barriers that you've got the levers to reduce and leave us to do the rest. Business creates business. Heard that from multiple businesses, so that would be no surprise to you either. So these are just some really high-level findings. We have developed them up into a bunch of around 20, I think we might even be at 30 recommendations now. We're really interested in looking at the things that we can actually make a difference on and what levers can we pull in the different agencies that we represent. So for local government, that might be regulatory levers, it might be around zoning, it might be around access to water, whatever that might be. For someone like a reader, we're a linker, a connector, a joiner of dots, a provider of research. It might be more about next steps, which I'll talk to you about some pieces of work that we can do, or it might be around connecting people to collaborate, for example. On November the 27th, we're going to be holding a workshop in Wairoa for businesses, and quite a lot of councillors are coming to that one too, because many of the councillors wear many different hats there. And we've got, on the 28th, we've got a workshop at Food East, thanks to our Food East friends, with a select number of businesses, around 30 or 40, to test our findings and our insights and to work through the recommendations and have them validate them. We've got really good engagement on that too, with some really senior players in those. And then we'll make our final report and recommendations public on the 12th of December. We'll have an event and invite event at Tarai. And then we've offered an event with Matariki the next day as well to have the regional leaders have an opportunity to chew through the research. So leading on from that, there's a few pieces of work that we felt with the board that were already no-brainers and we've already got broad support for that we've discussed with Matariki in more depth with the chairs. One of those is that we're kicking off this week actually is an economic impact assessment of State Highway 2 that will be undertaken by NZIER, the research company. So we're basing this piece of work on a successful piece that Northland Corporate Group did up north, looking at trying to form an argument to double lane their expressway up north to open up the economy. So we're doing this in cooperation with Trust Tairāwhiti, which is the EDA in Gisborne, and we're looking to see at this first stage what are the economic and social impacts of investing in a more resilient State Highway 2 between Napier and Gisborne. So we'll be looking at future potential impacts from investment, not only to existing businesses, but also other stakeholders in the region and wider socio-economic benefits such as health and educational benefits.
Yeah, sorry, Lucy, could you just do very high level, because we're
okay,
well over
sorry.
time and there's some questions,
Right.
so just very high level.
Right, three more
please.
points then.
Yep.
So you'll hear back about that. We're also working with Food East on a business case to test the validity and the commercial case for the Fermentation Centre of Excellence. And we are just kicking off a project with Tihei Takitimu to understand the economic cost of poor health outcomes for Māori in Hawke's Bay. And we're working with MSD, EIT and some others on a project to look at bridging the gap between local employers and local labour force, because there's a real issue and it's a growing issue around that lack of employment in the local labour force. So anything that we're doing now, if we are wound up, can be picked up by any organisation that we're working with to make sure that these pieces of work don't get lost.
Thank you, Lucy and Alistair. Any question, Councillor Hickey?
Comment?
Yep, comment, yes.
So he took me kia koe, Alistair. You know, back then in 2014, I was around then, and I just want to acknowledge you for the tenacity in regards to just stopping it and starting again, and ending up with Matariki and everyone inclusive. It was such a robust work, and just acknowledge how far you've come. You've come all the way over to Hastings now and set up Tarai over here in Heretonga. That's fantastic. And just want to acknowledge the comments that have been said too, that, you know, in order to have a strong community, we need a robust economic status as well. And along with that, more so as culture goes with that, unless we have all those, and then truly understand the impacts of climate, which you're talking about as well. Unless we put all those things together, community, commerce, culture and climate change, you know, we're going to struggle, but otherwise very, very good kōrero this morning, and to give me kōrero.
Yep. Thank you, Councillor Hickey. Mayor Hazelhurst.
Kia ora, and thank you for your presentation. As we know, HDC has a lot of skin in the game, financial skin in the game, and so, you know, our ratepayers are really, really interested in how we support economic development and the agency, because this is critical for us. It means opportunity and employment. So in terms of employment, yesterday we had a tour of the Wattie's factory for 2 hours with the regional leaders and Mayor Alex and the MP, and we talked about both water security and labour, and they are bringing in labour contractors now through, you know, various different add-on agencies. So the days of, you know, our local people working in the factory. So I think there is a massive, when you do the work around big employers and how we're getting our local people employed, I think there's a disconnect between how we can be more engaged with our local communities, because, you know, bringing in the contractors is a really, really easy option, but actually, and it's a secure option, but it doesn't help us with particularly our growing employment numbers through this time. So I think that there is a really big synergy. The other piece of work, and I think you released findings of the study on where people live and work across the region just recently. and both in Napier, Hastings, Central and Wairoa, and where the employment is going to be, and was a very interesting findings. But what it highlighted to me, the significance and importance of requiring a regional spatial plan. And, you know, is that something that Rita could look at? Because the freight and logistics plan and those sorts of things that, you know, local government can't do, we actually need somebody to understand where people are going. We've heard through the study, we know where people are going to be living, but we know where the work is going to be in Hastings. And so tying all of those things up, I think, is critically important. And I think the opportunity for, and it can't be obviously the regional council, so it has to be somebody different. And a regional spatial plan we've talked about here for a very, very long time. We haven't been able to do it because of Cyclone Gabriel. The Matariki hasn't been able to do it, and more so than now, but particularly with our future development strategy and where people are going to live and where they're going to work. This whole, and the opportunities for Wairoa, the opportunities for Central, from the studies of, you know, people working in Hastings but could be living in Central, and, you know, how's this going to unfold? And just when, you know, and the freight and logistics has been incredibly helpful, and now we're getting 4-laning expressways from studies like that work. So it's that enablement that I see the agency has a really, really big opportunity to help us with, as you've collected the data on many, many other aspects of our functioning region. But it was really interesting at the Wine Awards to talk to some of our big players and just to hear their concerns the other night. But talking to the valuation community, they're saying that, you know, our region is performing compared to others very well through these difficult times. So you know, we're doing well. We've got to keep going, and we've got to find those sort of tools and mechanisms to unlock a whole lot of other things. And you know, what he's just saying, that they used to have whānau year on year coming back for the season, they don't have that now. And so why is that? You know, so there's a whole lot of stuff that, you know, that you guys are in a strong position to be able to help us with. So I really appreciate that work. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I think good decision making depends on good information. I found this report actually quite inspiring. Warts and all, wasn't all good, but at least I felt so much better informed than before. So I really appreciated what you've given us. I suppose one thing that crossed my mind this morning as I was listening to the radio, and they're talking about there's a COP27 or whatever it is, Azerbaijan. They're talking about metres of potential sea level rise. Does that sort of feature anyway in your thinking? Because that's the structural change that we'll have to engage in to take that into account is just mind-boggling. It's certainly beyond my imagination. I just wondered where it fits in yours.
Through the chair. Thank you. Yeah, I think when we think about economic development, we think about a rise overall of living standards, and that's well-being more generally. So you can't just think of economic development as the growth of business. It's much wider than that, otherwise we'd be called the Economic Growth Agency. And so yes, absolutely, part of what we're doing, and it can probably from the outside seem a little frustrating that we're spending time doing research and collecting data, but I'm glad that we're already starting to see the benefits of that, because if the more we understand about our environment and future potential, but also future risks, the better that we can act as an advisor into the region. So yes, climate is absolutely part of the picture. We've got a real issue, obviously. This is like an understatement of the year around water in this region, and understanding what that means for the future of our business, which is heavily primary sector dependent still. And even we've got some wonderful advanced manufacturing gems out there that are often aligned or allied with the horticulture sector or have spun off that. So what is this going to mean for us in the future when we've got reduced water, we've got a drying climate, and we've got labour shortages? Those two things alone are enormous. But then you throw in housing, we throw in our education system, which is, school engagement is looking not flash at the moment. you throw in health statistics, which is why I'm really interested to start doing this piece of work with Tihei Takitimu, because we've got a population here that is experienced terrible health inequities, the Māori and Pacifica as well, that is a cost to the economy, not just in terms of direct costs to in terms of hospitalizations and health and so on, but those wider, the opportunity costs of what's lost to the economy. So yeah, we want to take a really broad view of economic development, and so understanding the place of climate. And I'm quite curious about this regional spatial plan and the role that we could potentially play in that. I would say, and Alistair's very eloquently said, just as a reminder, our shareholders are local government, iwi hapu, and business. That's an incredible grouping of people to have around the table, but it's also incredibly aspirational, you put it that way, because 14 separate entities with all of their governance groups, councillors and governors, which probably makes up around 110 governors, we think, then all of their executive teams and all of their agencies, we're talking about hundreds and into the thousands of people who have an opinion of what economic development is and what we should be doing and what we shouldn't be doing. And that's why we've taken, I know, because they tell me everywhere. But we've tried to take a really structured approach and a letter of expectations and clear reporting lines through to our shareholder representatives so that we can stay on track. But it means that shareholders have to, I guess, have confidence in that setup. And it is a big ask, but it's quite the aspiration. If we could crack that, no one else in the country is anywhere near this. And so Rita won't answer all the questions, but at least we've got a forum to ask the questions and to connect the dots and explore and challenge some of the thinking.
Yeah, thank you again. And your future plans, if they're as good as the work that you've supplied so far, I will just feel so much more capable of council playing its part in addressing the issues, the well-being issues particularly. I know that's your emphasis. I really enjoyed reading that. Thank you.
Councillor Sholin.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the report and presentation. I don't envy you in terms of all those stakeholders at all, because you're right. I think everyone you talk to does have a different definition of what economic development is and what success looks like. I appreciate as well that the journey this entity has been on means that you really have just been in the data collection phase because of the establishment taking so long. The question I keep being asked in the community, and so I want to present to you, is there is a historic criticism, especially of local government, that we commission reports and studies, that information is brought to light and then goes in a bottom drawer, and how that actually informs meaningful change within a community isn't always successfully translated in local government. So I'm interested to understand, given the data you're collecting, and it is insightful data, how is that translating into action and change within the community? Because my concern is there can be a disconnect, especially in the past with other EDAs, with not the entire business community being connected in. And you're also talking about other stakeholders here in terms of iwi and hapu, and I'm just interested in your views on that.
And I think they are well-founded concerns, through the chair. I guess we're trying to focus very much on practical steps that we can take. So I think a good example would be the State Highway 2 piece of work, right? So it was in the freight strategy, but there was no underpinning study under it that actually made the case. Whether it can be made or not, we will find out. That if the government invested more, simply put, if the government invested more money into building resilience, even if it's along 4 to 5, 6 pieces of that road, that it would open up that economy and have a greater lift in GDP for Wairoa and Gisborne. So if you can make that, it's like a social investment argument. If we can make that argument in this piece of work, and then they'll do some modelling to back it up, that's a piece of, it's an advocacy tool. So Mayor Craig, our Matariki, our local MPs can use that to argue the case for further investment. At the moment, they've got nothing to build that case on. So we can moan and we can talk about stop signs, but until they have that really granular level of information, they don't have a strong case. And there's some really good examples of, you need to take that and then you need a whole communications plan around an advocacy approach. And that's just one. The Tihei Takitimu one, by being able to prove the case that there's an economic benefit for investing more targeted investment in Māori health now, will lead to better economic outcomes and cost the government less in the long term, means that they will be able to use that in their advocacy for vote health, which at the moment only gets 3% of funding for Māori and nationally, despite the population and despite the health inequities. So each of these pieces of work that we do would have a particular purpose that we'll be very clear about, and a follow-up and action plan.
Excellent, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Farrell. Look, I've got a passion for education and training. And when I look through all the charts that you've got in there, it shows about 300 jobs for Hastings, 10 for Wairoa, and of the top 10 opportunities, Napier and Central Hawke's Bay don't feature. And I was concerned at why that is. And the other one is a lot of our talent is exported for tertiary qualifications, and very few of them return. How can we address that in the future?
Thank you. So yeah, it's the reason why the employment outlook is so poor is because of the state of our economy at the moment. So construction is going to fall off a cliff, it's predicted. That may change if we have the housing developments that we're all hearing about here and in Ahuriri. That's those stats are around kind of the recessionary climate. In terms of training, there's multifaceted. If we think we don't have a university here, but we do have EIT, and EIT's been hammered by Te Pūkenga and then by the cyclone. So we're starting to work with them because they need to completely rejig the way that they engage with business in order to ensure that they're actually delivering the skills that businesses need. So they're really quite fascinated by our research, and I'm meeting them again on Friday to talk through how can we support them to gather the right kind of data to develop their courses that they need. So it's a all of community kind of approach. We need to ensure that we've got the right training going into the right industry. So we've got, Alistair talks about this very well, it's like a two-tier economy here. We've got the primary sector where you've got relatively low-skilled roles in horticulture, meat processing and so on that are really finding difficulties to secure and engage their employees. And then at the manufacturing level, we've got a whole bunch of jobs, more than you would think, in areas like automation and robotics that are not being met from an educational perspective by our local EIT, but which they are open to exploring. Until we get that part right, we're going to have to keep importing labour into Hawke's Bay, and we're only going to keep people in Hawke's Bay if we can find them attractive jobs that aren't just seasonal. So there's a multifaceted approach, and if I've got time just to, on this what we want to do with MSD and EIT and others is to look at, if not replicating, but learning from a study that was done in Auckland, in South Auckland in 2016, which they called the attitude gap. And it looked at employers and local labour force, and it looked at the massive chasm in attitude between them. So employers, and I've heard this constantly, and you'll hear it from companies that you talk to who say that local employers are too lazy, they don't turn up to work, they wait for their first paycheck and then they leave. We've done everything we can, we've given them a sausage sizzle at lunchtime and we've given them free transport once a week. I don't know why they don't stay. Versus the local labour force that are beset with issues around not having driver's licences, not having good models of what does a workday look like, that get called the winds people when they turn up to work, so they feel like that they're not very welcome. And so that's what was found in South Auckland, for example, and we're hearing anecdotally. So we want to understand what is the real need from an employer perspective, what are they actually finding and what are they trying. From what I can find so far, only one of those programs with MSD has really been properly evaluated to see what works and what doesn't. And then we want to understand from that labour force that has been engaged and then disengaged or not yet engaged, so like the long-term not in employment educational training cohort that we've got here, to understand what's the blockage into those primary sector roles for a start, and then start to pilot with some companies, some willing companies, some different things that have worked elsewhere that might work here too, and then evaluate them and see if they actually work. Because you talked to Karen Bartlett from MSD, she said they've chucked tons of money at this over the years, trying to put programs up, and they don't really know because no one ever takes the time to stand back and evaluate what's worked and what's not. And anecdotally, often it's one or two people in a business that are passionate about making this work and that create the culture in there to allow it. Conversely, in some other companies, there's some of the things that I hear, even in our interviews, make your toes curl about what they think of our local labour force. So there is an attitude and engagement issue here that we need to work with the willing first and then I hope start to roll out. But that needs long-term commitment and it needs buy-in from business.
Yeah, thank you very much for your excellent report, Alistair and Lucy, and your wonderful answers. Very much appreciated. Happy to move the report.
Yep, thank you. Seconded. Moved Councillor Nixon and Councillor Nixon seconded. Trap for young players or old players in my case. Thank you, Alistair and Lucy, for coming along. And as Simon will note, my timekeeping gone, but I think it was necessary. There were some really good questions and some good feedback, so I think it was really important for that. And we wish you all the best and watch with interest as you work out the practical applications of the research that you're doing, which is not going to be easy, but we wish you all the best with that. So thank you for attending today. Thank you. Yep. So all those in favour say aye, sorry. Aye. Against? Cool, thank you. Right, Mr. Who's going to...
I'll actually introduce this because I think there's been, through you, Chair, I think a breakdown in communication with Dr. Grant, who is not actually here today to cover this report, but I think we can probably receive the annual report. I'm happy to take any questions or answer them if I can.
Sure, thank you, Mr. Allen. Is there any questions for Mr. Allen on the Hawke's Bay Museums Trust? No. Yes, Councillor Dixon.
Yeah, happy to move.
Yeah, thank you.
And I'm delighted with the way they're helping us with the working party. Very good.
Yep, thank you, Councillor Nixon. Could I have a seconder, please? Councillor Apatu.
Happy to second, thank you.
Thank you. Right. All those in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. Well, that gained very quick 10 minutes. Secretly, I was hoping that. It's all good. Thank you, Mr. Allen. And we, of course, looking forward, and we will see the archival facility going up. And I think the feathers are going up. Where are your feathers going up in February? So very, very exciting. Right. So how are we going? Yes, the quarterly financial report, item 8 on the agenda. So we'll invite Mr. Wilson to you've got a short presentation, Mr. Wilson.
Yeah, through you, Chairperson, I will introduce this topic. This is what we discussed when we had the last meeting, and we said we're changing how we're going to report some of the project work and the business work through to council to try and add a little bit more transparency into the whole process. So what we've designed is a one-page report that combines both financial and operational headlines and KPIs, so we can actually track, are they both going in sync, and are we able to actually track where we want to go and where we're tracking for the end of this financial year. So we've designed the structure. They're on the hub. We've got handouts for you. We're going to put them up on the screen. We're only going to put the graphs up on the screen because they're very difficult to actually read, I think, from your chairs looking up. And we've also got the actual business owners to come and actually talk to them. So it's not so much a financial presentation, it's more the business presentation, so that the financials actually underpin the business that we're doing rather than the way round. So today we're going to talk and present some of our growth projects with Brookville, Iona and Howard Street. We're going to talk about our IEF funded water project, and then we're going to talk and present about Toy Toy and Splash, and just give you a sort of an update on where they are after sort of one quarter of the year.
Yep, so I think we've just jumped ahead to item 9. So I think we'll do.
Sorry.
Yep, that's right. So we'll do Mr. Wilson's. I'm very excited about item 9 as well, Graham. But we'll do item 8. So yep.
Sorry. Through your chair, could I just make a recommendation that actually we do move to doing these projects first?
Yes. I'll accept that. Yep, accept that.
There's a number of staff here who can then.
Okay, sure.
Probably part once
That changed.
Right, so we're just going to have some handouts. So I'd just like to, while that's happening, thank Graham, Mr. Watson and Mr. Smith, who's I see up there, who's developed these reports, something that I've certainly wanted to see for a while. And I'll take some direction afterwards to see whether you want some of these to be reoccurring, or we are going to do a bit of a rotate, but there may be some that we want to see. And the objective is not a witch hunt on these things. It is just information provided to enable us to make better decisions or even set directions. So that's the purpose of the more detailed information.
So first project up is IEF water project with Graham Hanson, who is the project owner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and morning, councillors. To talk to, this is the IF wastewater project. Again, I'm not sure how well it's understood by councillors, so do you want me to step through the broad background to the project? This is a $38 million wastewater project. The chart you have in front of you are the three key projects of four. There's a smaller Clive Kohupatiki element, but these are the three principal projects that make up a wastewater project to establish new wastewater capacity from effectively Flaxmere to the Te Moana Showgrounds, and for the eastern side of Hastings City through Waipatu. So it's been separated into these three key elements, and I'll just talk through the three of them and the key issues for us at the moment. So starting with the top left, Pahara Keki, that's the, for those that have seen the work that we did, completed recently on the expressway, so from broadly the sports park to Omahu Road, so stage one of Pahara Keki is now finished. Stage three, which heads from the sports park down through into Lindisfarne, is going to the market pre-Christmas, and the following two stages that take us from Evandon Road through Parkeye Road all the way to Coventry and the Te Moana Showgrounds are both being tendered early in 2025. The principal issue with getting these to the market is a delay in manufacture of pipe from Turkey, and my continuing bane of my life is shipping, attempting to get product from the Northern Hemisphere to New Zealand as a continuing issue. The second project is Waipatu, and you can see the low level of expenditure intended through probably the first 2/3 of this year. Waipatu is the element of the project that we're using to balance our time and budget challenges on this particular project. I say the budget's set at 38 million a couple of years ago, and we are working through the Waipatu project looking at what would be probably a balancing or a management element for living within our budget. The Wairatahi project is the one at the bottom. You'll see significant expenditure occur from here on out. We've let a $7.2 million contract that has commenced between Flaxmere and Omahu Road, takes in the Wairatahi fast track housing development, and that involves a pump station and 2.5 kilometres of rising main. Within that, of the 7.2 million, $4 million relates to the IF wastewater project, so hence it relates to the $4 million, I think, that's shown on that graph. So for fear that the 7.2 is scaring you, that actually relates to three other elements that we've incorporated into the project. We have a water main heading along Omahu Road, and so we've opted to construct the water main through the very challenging expressway roundabout. We have about 12 assets already in the existing roundabout, and we have the 4 laning challenges in front of us associated with the expressway. So we've opted to include the water main project in some substantial drilling that we'll be doing through and under the expressway, and we're also laying a new 450 mil wastewater main that ultimately replaces capacity out of Flaxmere. So we're opting to do those two within this project, effectively in the same trench. And the last component is we're putting in HV ducts for Unison associated with providing additional power capacity south into the Iron Gate area. So hence that makes the $7.2 million. In terms of, I say, the number one challenge for us is simply getting pipe made in Turkey and into New Zealand. We've got 3 ships due here from mid-December into early January, and that will drive the timelines in terms of physically starting the next phases of work. In terms of positive elements, we've got a very competitive market at the moment. So again, frustrating in terms of waiting for pipe while we've got such a strong interest in our work, which I say for the 6.5 years I've been here, we haven't seen this certainly since COVID times. So we're keen to take advantage of that. We've reworked the IAF program with Kāinga Ora just to recognise these changes of dates and delivery, but it actually doesn't change the overall delivery date of early 2026. So it's just a reshuffling of the work program. All landowner arrangements are in place now for the works, so we thought that might have been a challenging space, but we've had good support to thread the needle through orchards and roads to get to Te Moana Showgrounds. So that's probably the summary from me, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Chair. Just in terms of the connection between the expressway and Parkaway Road, what line are you travelling? Did you mention Lindisfarne?
Yeah, so broadly we've got to extend, if you can visualise where we are at the moment, we've ended stage 1 opposite the end of Lyndhurst Road. Yep. We extend that further down to the sports park boundary. We then turn right angles, we come along the southern boundary of the sports park, and then down through the end of the Lyndhurst extension properties currently owned by Tumus. And we end up by, if you can recall the pipe band that we shifted across the road, we end up at the pipe band and then following the Mahora drain alignment to Evandon Road.
So from Parkaway Road, are we coming down Lyndhurst Road itself?
No.
No.
So we come, if we go the other way, we come along the expressway.
Yep.
We turn into the sports park.
Yes.
Carry on straight down to the pipe band building to the rear of the, I suppose, the urban boundary.
Yes.
Turn into the Mahora drain alignment. Get to Evandon Road, and then we head to Parkaway Road.
Got it. Thank you.
Councillor Corn, does everybody understand the graphs in terms of the green line is the cumulative budget, the red line is the year to date, and the dotted line is the expected forecast? And I think Brian Hanson, the Karamu Waikato, why that is doing what it is because of the pipes delay. Is that the reason for that? Why it's only going down the budget this year?
Partially, but it'll be the part of the project that we balance to live within our budget of 38 million, which we're concerned about. We have a large pump station proposal in the Waipatu area, $6 million, and we're looking to potentially engineer a way out of not needing that pump station. So it'll be a service for the more immediate future than the longer term future, but it'll be considered through our budget challenges.
So is everybody clear on the graph, how that works? Yep, and donations? Fantastic. Councillor Gordon.
Thank you, Chair. I'm interested in the capacity of the network, the project, capacity for growth and how far ahead that will take us, given that we're just settling on the future development strategy now, and we've had spatial plan mentioned. Obviously, this has been designed in advance of all that. The capacity of what's been put in place, how much more it can accommodate in growth.
So I can talk to a degree to that. This is work that's been done by Mr. Chapman, probably two and a half years ago, and it's acknowledged the capacity around certainly the Flaxmere area, Waipatu, and quite a large area around Waipatu in terms of Crosses Road. This also allows for inner city intensification. So the intention of be heading it at Amahu Road is to actually take capacity that heads into and through the city around the periphery. This is actually around the outer periphery of Hastings City. And it also caters for significant potential development in the Iron Gate, Kaipo areas. So it actually recognises all the growth and development areas that have been on our radar for a while.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the presentation and thank you for the reviewed layout too. It was really helpful. I think the thing I'm interested in understanding, particularly with Waipatu in mind and the out of our control delays as a result of resources not being able to come in via shipping, I'm just interested to understand what the knock-on effect is for our capital works program, because I realise Council in our long-term plan has a huge capital works program in its totality. And I'm just interested to understand, outside of just the financial aspect, what are the implications of the delays in terms of delivery of other projects that might have been backed up on this one?
This project, Councillor, this project largely stands alone. So at this point in time, we have no concerns in relation to its impact on other projects. And probably of most importance is that we are confident to still deliver the whole program by that early 2026 period. So it's actually just a delay in time rather than an extension of time associated with this project.
Fabulous, thank you.
Yep, thank you. Councillor Watkins.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Graham, just in terms of the new pipe that's been put down the expressway, there's a series of manhole inspections that are sitting pretty proud on the pipe. I'm sure the answer is yes, but when the four laning eventually comes down there, these will be all outside the required road width?
Yes, and that's a good question, Councillor, and certainly one of our challenges that this project was promulgated before this current government, and four laning in those days, that Waka Kotahi's position was more a pipe dream than a reality. We had a change in government. We had approvals, in fact, to locate this pipework on the southern or eastern boundary of the expressway, on the basis that all the four laning would generally occur on the other side of the road. So they were happy that we located as close to the eastern boundary as we could. Fair to say that's been challenged a little with this Wairatahi project now that the four laning is more strongly committed to. But again, we sort of run out of options beyond staying as close to the southern boundary as possible. Waka Kotahi have continued to support that position. So the contract that's been let now gets us to Flaxmere, all signed and approved, and we're just seeking the approval for the last 300 metres to get to the sports park. But the fact it's an extension of what we're already built, we're not expecting any issues with that.
Thank you, Councillor Nixon.
Thanks, Chair. You intimated the construction market has become quite competitive when you first started talking. Is this likely to impact on the cost of doing these projects? And have you any thoughts as to what the savings, if there are any, might be?
It's a very speculative question, Councillor. On the basis that we've let 3 contracts already to the tune of $11 million. I suppose for the first time I'm sitting here talking about projects that have come in under our budgets. So that's a first, certainly associated with the drinking water project that I delivered for you for the previous 5 years. And there continues to be strong interest, certainly within Hawke's Bay, but also from out of Hawke's Bay. We have some new players potentially coming to our area because of the quantum of work that's available. So I'm optimistic we're going to see these good prices optimistically through 2025 as well. So hence we're keen to get to the market as soon as possible.
That's good. I'll let that answer go. Yep.
Councillor Harvey.
Yeah, thank you. Just some quick feedback on the actual report, which is excellent. But when we're considering that this is for the community as well, is it possible to, because you have to sort of draw a line across to work out where to the total spends are for each. Are we able to just actually have for each of them what is the total amount somewhere that's allocated to each project? and also spend to date and remaining, or just something a little bit more simplified. It's quite an internal document. We're all really aware of it and you know, have potential to understand it greater than what the community has, but
Sure.
I think that would be
Yep,
helpful.
that's good feedback, councillor Harvey, so we'll work on that, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Hanson, so for that, shuffle a few things to get here, so thank you. Museums Trust, is that, Chris, you're gonna do that one, or Graham?
Well, just in the interest of time, we actually weren't going to talk about this because we're still really in the development phase and all on track, and then move on to the growth project with Brookvale, Iona, and Capital with Mr. Rao, who's to come here.
Yep, sure. Welcome, Rao.
Kia ora, councillors, morning. Hang on. There you go. Make sure I move my keyboard so I don't move those slides again. So just, I guess, in a similar sort of vein to Mr. Hanson, brief headlines on the 3 growth areas that are active at present, and timely, I guess, because we did a bus tour late last week and crossed through some of these areas, so we saw them live on the ground. But in terms of Q1 of 2020, the first quarter of this report, for Brookvale, the primary focus there and expenditure was focused on design and investigation work that goes alongside the stormwater basin. Council's well versed in some of the complexities that we're working through and navigating on that, but that's been a big focus area and continues to be so. We're also doing some precursor work there in terms of land acquisition activities, in terms of acquiring land that's necessary for that basin. And then I guess the key piece of work that's coming up is the Romaines Drive improvements there. There's a water main going in and some edge improvements to the Romaines Drive corridor and connections through into the Brookvale area. That body of work was going through a tender process and is scheduled to start in early 2025. There's ongoing active management of the budgets and phasing and timing, particularly for Brookvale, which we will continue to bring back to council for consideration as things evolve. And I guess the primary challenge that we face, or the primary issue that we've got in that space, is the stormwater solution. As I said, that's proving to be more complex than originally anticipated, primarily driven by a higher than anticipated water table that we've got to navigate through. Howard Street, that body of work is progressing well. Again, the primary bit of work that's happened there has been focused on the pump station, the wastewater pump station. That's the last piece of the puzzle there, and also the sealing of the internal road. All going to plan. The pump station will be commissioned and complete early next year. In parallel with that, we've got developers who are actively progressing developments within the Howard Street area. That work is coinciding well with our public works, and the two are working in unison, so there's no impediments to either party. And from a budgeting perspective, we're largely tracking in line with what we've indicated there in terms of the graph, although there's a little bit of a forecast bubble there, but the end point will be the same. Iona, again, as you would have seen on the ground, works there have been progressing for the first 600 metres along Middle Road. That's due for completion in the first couple of months of 2025. I guess the graphical representation there and the year-to-date spend being flatlined there, that's just a timing issue in terms of claims coming in. So that's been actively worked on and addressed. The net result is that we will be tracking along the budget there, and the end point for completion being in that sort of March period of 2025. We're working, obviously we have in place with the developer development agreement, which has a controls around budget expenditure, so we're confident that we're going to meet those. further work on the the remaining works is ongoing, and a development agreement has also been mooted there, which we'll bring back to council in due course. Happy to take any further questions.
Thank you, Mr. Kemp. Councillor Watkins.
Thank you, Chair. Well, again, just in relation to the pump station in Howard Street, what was the developer contribution to the increased cost of that project?
I might ask Ms. Bainbridge here, who's the technical lead on that project, to provide those details. Jeff?
Good morning, Council. I'm sorry, Councillor Watkins, could you repeat the question for me?
Yes, so just in terms of the Howard Street pump station, there was an escalation in cost because there was an upgrade in species due to increased development on that site. What was the developer's contribution to that increased cost of the pump station?
So, as you're aware, Howard Street has internal DCs as well as external DCs that they have to meet. So any additional cost to the internal DC would be distributed across the development, which, because this pump station has allowed for additional capacity within the development, so instead of 350 housing sites, this will allow for 400 housing sites. We project that it will maintain about the same internal costs as projected previously. Any external DCs, which are more associated with the stormwater and the roading, which are more associated with the stormwater and the works in Howard Street itself, will be paid for out of the general DC bucket, so it would be dispersed in there.
So my understanding was, when we were aware of the issues around the pump station, there could be an extra cost of up to $1 million. And we were told that was going to be funded. If that expenditure was created by giving developers the right to increase the density on the site, would we not expect that extra is paid up front? Why would we wait for that to come through?
If I could just jump in, through Chair, I think with that we are bound by our development contributions policy and how that determines, I guess, the payment period and timing. So, as you'll be aware, with development contributions generally, there are key milestone points when developers are required to pay development contributions. The way the internal development contribution model is structured is exactly the same. So, we have no ability to generate revenue earlier than we had previously, just because we're spending more money to make the pump station bigger to allow greater intensification. We will have to wait as development occurs to receive those payments for that. I think just one last point is that any holding costs that we may incur through that time because of that are recovered from that internal development area. So the ratepayer is not contributing at all to those internal development costs.
All right, there will be no further questions. Thank you, Ms. Bainbridge, Mr. Kemp. So next one we're going to do.
Next one we're going to look at is Toy Toy, and we have put some a financial table in this. It specifically goes down to the rating requirement, and the graph maps the rating requirement over the 12-month period. And we've got Megan here to actually sort of talk about the operational aspects and the support of these numbers.
Megan?
Toy Toy, we're looking at the start of the financial year of quarter two being busy as well as quarter one previously. However, there's been a decrease in the number of events in quarter one compared to quarter one last financial year, but the numbers of attendance are up. So that sort of gives a variation of where we're at. We're experiencing a slow but steady series of event cancellations by hirers due to the current financial environment. This includes actually 3 banquet bookings that cancelled due to the perception of how the community would look if they were holding a banquet for their corporate or business. Which will influence revenue, particularly catering revenue, and ticket sales are down marginally and buyers are inconsistent and unpredictable. We've been talking to Napier Municipal Theatre and other venues in New Zealand, and it's obvious that buyers are carefully using their discretionary dollar, and predicting successful, well-selling performances is harder than previous years. What we used to know would sell out doesn't seem to be that way anymore, and Hawke's Bay is the slowest selling nationwide in ticketing. Some of the highlights for Q1 were the Comedy Festival in July. So we had 4 nights of comedy and cabaret. We sold 1,300 tickets, generating a 13K profit. People seem to want to laugh, so that's good. We'll do more of that. We had the National Iwi Leaders Forum, which saw 83 iwi leaders in a board table set up, and so that was quite a challenge for our staff, who certainly rose to that. And we regularly receive very positive feedback on our staff's professionalism and customer service. And of course we had the Te Reo Symposium, which was amazing and has rebooked for November 2025. We recently did a Q1 annual audience survey. We had 1,342 respondents for that, which is the most we've had. With a 99.8% satisfaction result compared to last year, which was 97.2%. 61 of our respondents cited that Toi Toi's contributed to their personal and cultural well-being, compared to 49% in 2021 and 55% in 2023. Ticket prices and not knowing what's on are the main things that are stopping residents coming to Toi Toi. However, these reasons have seen a decline from previous years. And the survey has and always does highlight areas for continued improvement, which we mark and create improvements for. Just regarding the commentary in the report around the catering revenue, so because of when we had the Toi Toi Symposium first come to us, we were going to have our exclusive caterers do the catering. So when we did the forecasting for our catering revenue, we based it on that amount of money, and as the process moved and it got bigger and bigger and bigger and it moved outside of Toi Toi, we were no longer able to hold that exclusive catering. So our revenue will slowly come down, but however our expenditure for dish catering is also reduced quite considerably. So there is, we are looking at forecasting that to balance itself out. And yeah, the finances, we are looking at revenue down by 7,000 at the moment, and again that is due mainly to the catering. So I've already had October in, and we're looking sort of back up there again, so we are going to swing back and forth. Our expenditure, we've been really focusing on making sure our expenditure is being managed, and the main influence on that is our electricity and gas at Toi Toi operationally. That is making the biggest impact on our expenditure.
Thank you, Chair. I've got 2 questions, please. Theatre seats about 990, I think, doesn't it?
979.
979. What number of seats do you have to sell to constitute a full house?
979.
That's what I would be thinking.
I love it.
But you mention here that in July you had 1,300 people attend with 3 sold-out shows.
in the functions room.
That was functions.
It was
room,
held in the
it?
functions,
Thank
yeah.
you. Okay, that's answered that. My second question relates to unexpected remedial works on site. What were those, please?
Yep. So some of those works, as with a major build, and especially a heritage and new build, we've had some difficulties around the connections between the old building and the new building. So we've had, over the last few years, we've uncovered a few leaks that have come through, and very, very, very hard to predict and very hard to find. And we're just trying to manage as they come, and obviously that eats into our capital expenditure budget. We've had a few issues with homelessness around the laneway space. It's a very comfortable space for homeless people to gather. We have power outlets on the outside, and we did that specifically for being able to have events out there, but of course they're also really handy points to charge phones. So we are having a few issues around the gates, making sure that the access control is working. Just minor remedial works that happen in a new build that we have to just keep on top of.
So that includes, I noticed the veranda outside.
Yeah. Yes, so that awning was not part of the project to repair it, and so when we got into the first big rain, it was leaking, and it leaked into all the lighting along Hiratonga Street. So that was when the lighting went out, we realised that it's not waterproofed. So we then had to do some remedial work on waterproofing that to make sure that it wasn't raining on the street.
Yep. Thank you. Councillor Nixon.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yeah, I was just looking through the P&L, and there's this little item there that sort of caught my attention. We call it a P&L, I think that's what it is. Under other, which includes internal charges, we had a budget of 459 for the quarter, an actual of 304, leaving a surplus of 155. I hope I'm reading it correctly. What's in there? I mean, how come we suddenly have this huge saving in that area, or are we allocating less cost than we had anticipated?
Well, partly they've actually incurred slightly less cost, sort of sitting there, because that's really capturing everything else. We've been slightly under on maintenance that we had relative to budget. We've been slightly over on service and accommodation, partly because of the power and the gas costs coming in there. Admin is quite significantly under. The internal charge, which is the allocation of the internal resources, that's very much in line with the budget. There was one-off transaction that sort of kept it under the expected budget, and we're not expecting that to continue. So what we will see as we go into the following quarters, we will be spending much more to budget and possibly ending up maybe 150 under at the end of the year because of the positive start that we've had to that.
Just repeat. So, did you say it was the catering? Was that part of it?
No, the catering's put in separately.
Quite separately.
Yeah, goods. Yeah.
So we've got goods purchased for resale,
Yeah.
which sits in the catering, and then there's a 50% margin on top of that for the catering revenues.
That's great. Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
Yep. Could I just ask a question regarding that? I note the goods purchased for resale 1.370. So that includes the in-house caterer.
Yes.
Yep. So the differential between that and the revenue, and I assume the corporate the corporate revenue corporate. Yeah, doesn't. And did you say there's a 50% margin on top of that as well? Did you, or
there's 50% margin on the goods purchased for resale
on the 1.37?
0.15.
Yep. Yep. Okay. Councillor Sholem.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks for the presentation. I've got a couple of questions, if that's all right. The first one is, given the rating requirement that's highlighted in the report, I'm just really interested to understand the extent to which the current mix of community and corporate events impacts overall revenue generation. Because obviously, if we continue to adopt the business case that we have, which is we will have a mix of community versus corporate events, then there will be an ongoing rating requirement or rate requirement at the end of the year. And I'm just interested to understand how that works at the moment and how dependent Toi Toi is on the community events as well, given that you've indicated that corporate events seem to be cancelling a bit.
Sure thing. Community events are also unfortunately dying away as well due to costs, and that's a little bit of a strategy that we're working on moving forward on how we balance that out better. Although there is that feeling that things are slowing down, we're also just as busy. So it's trying to weigh it up at the moment. The community commercial split is about 60-40 commercial, and I think about 40% of 60-40 community, and I think 40% of that community is council hire. So currently Hastings District Council hires of Toi Toi sit in the community rate. So we're also working on a little bit of a policy to rethink how we do that. But, you know, we also want HDC to utilise Toi Toi. In fact, you know, we want it to be utilised even more than it is currently, because it is a facility owned by HDC. So the funds are at least kept internally. So we've noticed a lot of HDC are going externally for meetings, and we really want to kind of put a policy together to bring that back in so that Toi Toi is being utilised by HDC.
If I may follow up. That's really interesting that we're hiring at the community rate, and I'd be really interested through you, Chair, in an offline environment to talk to staff about that a bit further, because it means that the impact of that is sitting on Toi Toi in terms of rate requirement, and I'm just not sure that's a fair reflection necessarily of the activity in there, but
We'll take
that's
this in
for another
action.
day.
Take this in action.
Thank you.
Yep.
So the other thing I'm really interested in understanding is how council evaluates, because looking at this new report structure we've got, community return versus corporate return. And what I mean by that is I'm aware of a new framework in terms of the life performance value calculator. Are you aware of that? And could you talk about that a little bit more?
Absolutely.
And how we might be able to utilise that in our reporting of Toi Toi?
Certainly. There was a report released by the Ministry 2 weeks ago by Massey University. That was a life performance value measurement tool. So the Ministry of Culture and Heritage paid for that research, and it really is a massive piece of work that talks about how we value life performance within our community, but also from an economic perspective. And that alongside that comes the value calculator. So it's an ability to be able to, alongside with events who already do measure the events in Hastings, it allows us to measure the value of that impact to our community and to our visitors. I think one of the pieces of data was for every dollar spent in the live performance industry in New Zealand, we make $3.20 on every dollar. So I think it was the GDP was $17.3 billion to the economy from live performance. So yeah, really interesting data.
Thank you. So through you, Chair, if it's agreeable, I'd be really interested to take that away as an action as well, to look at especially because there's a rate requirement and the investment that we're making as a council, what the return is potentially through that calculation as well. Just
Sure, got that. Yep.
Thank
Captures
you.
in action. Thank you. Mia Hazelhurst.
Thank you, and thank you for your presentation, Megan. I'm just interested in where we're sitting with conferencing in New Zealand and where Toi Toi is sitting, and how are we getting where we compare to last year, and have we noticed a decline in conferencing coming to Toi Toi?
If I could get Colton to come up, who's the conferencing expert, who attends trade shows in New Zealand and meetings, and he could talk to us.
Oh, thank you.
Kia ora, Council. So did I hear the question correctly in that we're looking for an overview of where we're sitting within the conference market, any trends that we're identifying at the moment from our activity? So the conference market is under pressure, like all other markets at the moment. We have excellent profile as a region, but we have significant challenges as well. So air transportation into our region is difficult. We have traditionally approached associations. Essentially, associations have different tiers of membership. They're more pliable in terms of budget. They're more prepared to look at multiple accommodation models, which is sort of the environment we work within, particularly within Heretatonga. We are seeing there are less corporate conferences coming into Hawke's Bay. This is in a Hastings context. I can't speak for my colleagues in Napier. But what we are seeing is that the community events and the community relationships are yielding commercial opportunities for conferencing. So we are seeing particularly iwi-based groups, we're seeing health-based groups, we're seeing relationships we have with community service providers turning into incredibly lucrative, mutually beneficial relationships that are yielding conference opportunities. So whereby the corporates at the moment are pulling back and looking at efficient models. So we're talking about single site, large format accommodation providers that can also conference. Those community-based groups seem to be well funded and well motivated to keep coming into our region in Heretatonga.
Okay, thank you, Cole.
Thank you. Thanks, Megan and Colton. I think what we'll do now is we'll have a 10-minute break. The workshop after this has been postponed, so we will be able to have a bit of time to go over. So those of you who are joining us on live stream, stay tuned. We'll be back in about between 10 and 15 minutes. So thank you. Ready to go? Yep. Right. Tēnā koutou katoa. Welcome back, everybody, and welcome back to those who are watching on live stream. Just got a few, one or two reports to tidy up, and then Mr. Wilson will do the main report. Before we move on, just in regards to Toitoi, if you note on the financial reports there, the 2024 total budget at the bottom there, the net result or rate requirement is $5.014 million. So that's the extent at which the ratepayers are subsidising, and a lot of our same as our libraries and Splash, other entities do. So just wanted to make that clear, and I'll just pass it over to Mr. Watson. We've had a little discussion about the reporting for this in future.
So what we'll do for the next meeting, we'll actually sort of split the Toitoi up, because Toitoi is actually the sum of different businesses. We've got the food business in there, there's a leasing business in there, we've actually got the events in there. But as you can sort of see when you look at in the lines in the P&L account, the biggest cost is actually the interest and the debt repayment, because we're still carrying a significant amount of debt from when we did all the refurbishment. So we'll split all those different areas up and then present each one, so then you've got an idea of how all this comes together and where the money is being made from the operational perspective. But as I say, the biggest portion is we have to cover the interest and debt repayment from previous decisions. But we'll present that at the next time we have a performance and monitoring session.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Watson. Welcome, Tom. We're on to Splash Planet now. So,
kia ora, councillors. So yeah, Splash Planet. Obviously, very early days for Splash Planet. Just covering Q1, where we're not open and yet. You can see there's a slightly different profile to what you've been seeing for the other facilities and services, where we have the income mainly coming in January, and then that offsets the rating requirement, which is the big drop there. We are tracking within budget, but like I said, it's still very early days. We've had a bit of vacancy to save on payroll. A lot of the maintenance invoicing will drop in, throughout Q2 and Q3, and then towards the end of the year. So there may be a slight adjustment to that, although there is a profiling of the accounts throughout the year. Milestones for Splash Planet that we've kind of covered in the first quarter. We, as a correction to how we operated last year, we put tickets on sale on the 23rd of September, and that was in the hope to mitigate some slow ticket sales at the start of the season. At time of writing, we had 700 tickets issued. I can update you that as of this morning, across bookings and individual ticket sales, we're just under 7,000. And we've got about 250 Hawke's Bay residents members signed up with membership so far. So ticket sales are okay. They are largely down to the bookings, iwi Day, schools, community groups, that sort of thing. And then roughly 1,500 of them are individual ticket sales throughout the season. We have onboarded all of our staff now, or are onboarding this week, because we open on Monday. So we have about 70 staff that have been through an induction, plus about another 40 returners. So we will be fully staffed for the season, or at least at the start of the season. And then, we get to the end of February where university students start to return. There's a little bit of risk around there, but we'll look to manage that throughout the season. A lot of asset work, obviously, getting ready. So we've had new floorings on the indoor pools. We've had a boiler replacement. So we've actually had the boiler that was in Toitoi installed into the indoor pools at Splash Planet. Lots of small works, and there's an upgrade to the CCTV, which is probably the other large investment that we've got going in, and that's as a reaction to a safety report that we have done on the slides on an annual basis. Within the report, there's obviously the risk table, and it talks to the things that are pretty well covered for Splash. Adverse weather, obviously, impacting operations. We've spoken about through other workshops and meetings that some of the stuff that we're going to do to mitigate that throughout the season with the voucher coding, the discount times where we might be slightly lower visitation. poor economic conditions, this could go either way for us. So, the kind of, will people stay away because of the pricing, or is it going to increase the kind of staycation, people not going away? So Splash Planet becomes a more kind of a affordable versus an overseas holiday sort of opportunity. So we'll wait and see how that plays out over time. We increase in operational costs. So that's probably the one flag that we're seeing throughout Q1 is obviously the energy costs are up versus budget. There is a profiling to that across the year, but we are down on consumption as well because we were doing a lot of work this time last year. So we just need to kind of keep an eye on that throughout the season and make sure that, that we take actions to offset as best as possible. Aging assets on site. So there is an asset management plan on site. I think the boiler upgrade speaks to this quite a lot. In that, we are maintaining what we've got. It was a low-cost option to replace a boiler that needed replacement, but it's a 5-year renewal plan versus a kind of 20-year renewal plan, and that's to talk around the, if we were going to adopt a longer-term strategy for Splash Planet, we may have chosen a different option at this point rather than something different 5 years out. As far as the kind of most immediate risk, unfortunately, the bane of my life at the moment is batteries for go-karts. We have been working since the end of the season to address this issue. They're losing charge, essentially. We've been to and fro with the manufacturer. They are, the world's leading manufacturer of go-karts, so they do have a reputation. After a lot of trial and error of repairs on site, they have agreed to replace all of the batteries. Unfortunately, lithium batteries are hard to ship. We spent about 2-3 months trying to get them on a boat. They are on a boat now, but they don't arrive until the 15th of December. We have some loan batteries coming from Australia that has been arranged through the agent. They arrive here this week, and the agent is coming out to help us install and set up the operation on site, but it's very last minute. I do appreciate, so that is our main risk to service at the moment. Everything else is up and running as it should be.
Excellent. Thank you, Tom. Question, Councillor Sholin?
Thank you, Chair. I've got 2 questions, if that's all right. The first one is around the internal charges item. I was just wondering, can we have an indication of what that is?
1.6 million.
Yeah, again, the key part of that is the key part of the internal charge is the allocation of the HR time, the finance time, the parks, not the parks time, sorry, the building services time to do the maintenance work, and we have a plan, so as Tom was alluding to there, that we sort of work then through the period. So that's the core build-up of that.
Okay, no, that's great.
Can I just add one point through you, Chair? I think when we look at these, and it's the same with Toy Toy, when it refers to internal charges, it's actually referring to all other costs, including internal charges. So there's more to that line than just internal charges. It's sort of a wrap-up of, there's particular costs that are separated out, personnel, maintenance, building services, energy costs, for example. Everything else gets bundled together, but that includes internal charges as well. So 1.6 million is not the internal charge allocation. It's a summary of a whole lot of costs.
If I may, through you, Chair, just a bit of feedback from my perspective with the new report. Given that such a large percentage of the overall, in this particular case, it'd be quite good to have a little more detail, even if it's a star somewhere, or just to make that clearer.
Yep. Take it as an action. So,
thank you.
Yep.
And then my second question through you, Mr. Chair, is, IC Splash is a really important asset for our community, particularly tourism, and a lot of businesses rely on the visitors that we draw in with Splash. But I do have to acknowledge the rate requirement around it, and I feel like I may have asked this question before, and forgive me if I have, but I'm just really interested to understand whether or not we've explored other ways to sort of offset that requirement a little bit, like partnerships or sponsorships, whether it's some corporate suddenly has their branding all over our go-karts, or I don't know. I'm just kind of interested to know if we've explored any of those sorts of ideas.
Yeah, through you, Chair. Yeah, great question. We are kind of starting down that route, particularly sponsorship. There's a policy document that is due to come to, I think, the Community Wellbeing Subcommittee in the not too distant future. And then we can discuss, because there are, evident opportunities. And I think that will be the point at which we kind of look to progress that piece of work.
Wonderful, thank you. I'd be very supportive of that.
Thank you. Councillor Nixon?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I may have missed what Councillor Sholm said. Did she ask that the internal charges be separated out?
She did. Yeah, that's an action, so.
All the
And-
costs.
And that would apply, because I had the same question with the Opera House, with Toy Toy. I think it would just, because I know it's about $1 million in Splash, as I understand. Is that right? 1.6.
1.6 for the full year.
No, what, just the finance charges?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't realise it was that high. All right, I misread it. Yeah, I think it would help us a lot to understand, because that's a charge that doesn't specifically relate to the operation. It's more of an allocation of money spent in this place.
Yes, some of them are, but we'll do that. Thank you. Right, so Tom, no pressure, but what we'd like to do, have hot weather, and for the farmers at 2 o'clock between 5, it can rain, so that's your last responsibility, but otherwise, thank you, Tom, and all the best for the season for the team. We look forward to a successful season, so thanks, Tom. So the last item reported on here is housing. Since that hasn't kicked off, we'll look at that next quarter, but I'd just like to seek some direction. We've had some feedback from councillors regarding for the infrastructure projects, perhaps showing a total, some breaking down the internal charges. From the accountants sitting up the front here, probably includes me, we thought that was a worthwhile exercise because you're all engaged and asking questions. So I'd like to seek a direction in terms of you happy to continue on with the reporting with that, and also what do you want to see? In terms of timing, we probably couldn't do every one, but you may want to see some that occur every month. So I'm just seeking some direction now for that, Councillor Harvey.
Yeah, thank you. I was just using the first page as a reference that I think it needs to be across all of them, so that the community understands what's the investment in the projects, what's the current status, what we've spent, and how much is remaining, that type of thing. So they've all got the same graphs, pie graphs. So
yeah, but there is
not pie graphs.
There's financial information which actually does show that. It's on the grid, so it does show the percentage spent total. So I think you were just referring to the infrastructure, and some of those projects are over multiple years, if that's correct. But yeah, but there is, those percentage figures are actually on there with year-to-date spend. So. Yep.
Sorry, can you just point me to?
Yep, so if you look at Splash, Splash is not a good example because nothing's happened. But Toy Toy, it's got percentage of year-to-date budget, variance, on there. But, yep. So just seeking any other feedback, so we're all happy to proceed with that. So thank you. So I'd just like to, there's been a lot of work put in behind that. Regan, Aaron, Graham, Bruce, and who others been involved in doing this?
Yeah, so, Campbell, who's the annual management accountant.
Yep.
Prepared the information.
Campbell as well. So thank you. So we've got some actions which we'll follow up in regard to that.
Sorry, one other.
Sorry, yes. Yep.
The one around CBD and Civic Square, that doesn't have commentary, does it, or anything? It's just sitting there below museum storage. Or is that actually, sorry, it does, it comes under key points. There's one little bit there about the status of it, just one note, but then seems to be nothing else. Is that right?
Yep. Who wants to? Bruce,
that's a correct observation. Yeah. So on that.
So do you anticipate providing more information around that part of the report?
Yes, we are. The key was to focus on, we thought Toy Toy and Splash because the conversations, a growth project in water to start, and then we'll develop these further to then present at future meetings.
Thank you. Okay, right. So this is item 9, so could I please have a mover for that, councillor Sholem, and a seconder, councillor Nixon. All those in favour say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Mr Wilson, item 8, please.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the first quarter result at the overall level that we've got. Thank you. Just a reminder that all of the Gabriel expenditure and revenues are now built into the budget, whereas last year, of course, it happened in the financial year where they weren't. So that's now been factored in fully as well. So that's what you'll see as we go through. In that first quarter one, you can see the cash ongoing operations. There's a surplus of $5.9 million in there. 2 million of that is related to operational revenue. It's mainly driven by a one-off grant for fluoridation, a fluoridation project that's happening. And then we've got underspends in actual cash operations number as well, which we'll go through. The other one is the total revenue to fund capital projects. That's behind by about 6.3 million. Of course, that's driven in terms of reimbursement by actual capital spend and completion. The net position for Gabriel shows a $3.4 million favourable there. That's more around the fact that there's been less settlements than actually budgeted for in terms of the phasing. So we've budgeted phasing to happen in a certain period of time, and it hasn't happened because settlements have slowed as we get to the end, which was always expected at this time. So the overall surplus that you're looking at there is $2.1 million, absolute bottom line. The one thing I'd just like to make a comment on is there is a lot of phasing variance in the first quarter. So where you will get budget managers expecting to spend in these months at this rate, that doesn't always happen. Things happen and they underspend or overspend, and then it comes back online. And so that's just something to note, because that is a recurring theme in this particular quarter. In terms of revenue, we're $8.3 million behind budget, as alluded to, mostly driven by the $6.3 million subsidies reimbursement for capital projects. Basically, when the capital project is complete, as milestones occur, that's when you will see that money come in. And you can see that in terms of the capital spend as well, where we're behind budget by around $16.5 million. So it's not a complete surprise to see that. So we've had that in terms of that, and we've also had lower cyclone reimbursement coming in for settlement, but that's again because settlements are lower. So there's an offset to both of those revenues going through, coming through there. It's mainly in the VBO area of the grants that has slowed down. In terms of expenditure is $10.4 million favourable, and pretty much driven by underspend in terms of phasing for operational lines such as expert advice, contracted services. There's a whole plethora of lines that go into that. On top of that, Cyclone Gabriel costs $7.4 million underspend. Again, it's due to those settlements being slower than we originally phased in there. And also personnel, $494K favourable in that line, due to the number of vacancies that council are holding across quite a number of activities at this point in time. In terms of capital spend, total capital plans around 280 million, as you can see on that dotted graph going up there. And the first quarter spend was 36 million versus 53 million, around 16.5 million. Of that, 8.5 million is due to settlements for the Cyclone Gabriel. And I think I've detailed a number of other areas where they have just been a little bit off in terms of the revenue and also the new capital spend. We are looking at the deliverability of that 280 million. Officers are just looking at how that will pan out and where we think that will be. Of course, any underspend here either gets rebudgeted into the following year, and it does also mean that we're borrowing slightly less if we're not doing that full capital program going forward. That's the underlying outcome or effect that we have there. In terms of external debt, we have $412 million currently in the first quarter. That's tracking pretty much as expected. In the LTP budget, we were expecting 489 million at the end of this financial year. We are pretty much tracking exactly to how we thought we would spend. We're probably going to borrow another 35 million at the beginning of December to ensure appropriate level of funds to continue to pay our CapEx expenditure and OpEx expenditure over the period through the December, January, February period. We obviously also get revenues in from rates, from fees and charges, and from subsidies and grants as well. But that's exactly in line with where we expected to be in terms of the LTP budgets. Any questions?
Mr Wilson. Councillor Apatu.
Thank you, Mr Wilson, for highlighting the personnel costs that are favourable. I guess my eyes lit on that with the report, thinking we've got so much work going on and so much headlines. You know, I just want to be reassured, I guess, that we have the capacity to keep doing a good job. I'd just like to be reassured that we have enough capacity within our team to carry on, that we, you know, our savings plan isn't compromising the ability to do a good job.
I think, yeah, so there's always pressure on the organisation to continue to deliver on the program that's in front of us, and I think, and in some areas that pressure is greater than others. So if I look at Mr Sue with the transportation recovery team, you know, there's vacancies that we're holding there, not by choice, but by market demands, I guess. So that's an area which is a continued focus for the team to remedy. But certainly, yeah, the vacancies that we're holding at the moment are largely not by choice, and we're not necessarily holding vacancies open to extend and save money because, to your point, that just puts pressure on the wider organisation. So generally, we're trying to recruit. It's just the nature of the process.
Thank you. Councillor Nixon.
Yeah, thanks. I read at least 4 times about our savings target of 2.7 million, which I think interests everybody. But the only place I could find where I thought perhaps it was being discussed is under paragraph 5. Is that what paragraph 5 is purporting to tell us? It is? Because it hasn't got a sort of, it sort of mentions in bits and pieces rather than giving us a summary. That's all. I just mentioned that.
Yeah, we progress, because we only really set the savings up going into September, and this is the first quarter report, then we haven't done a full presentational report on the savings. We expect to bring that back at the end of Q2, where we've got, these are the savings targets that we identified, this is the progress to date, but it's just purely timing of when it was set up, and there hasn't really been enough time to generate significant numbers there, unlike the unbudgeted, where we've actually had 2 major portions of expenditure already this year, being the Beach Road and the Te Pai Whenua payment that was deemed unbudgeted and brought to council. So it's pure timing. It will be there.
Yeah, that's the way I read it. Now, the other one was, when I can find it again, when we talk about, we had finance costs. How much is interest of that, or is it all interest? Because finance costs sort of tends to be somewhat broader than than interest in my interpretation. And I just wonder, perhaps, it would be better if we knew what the interest cost was, because it's become, I read somewhere else, it's getting really significant as a total fee to the council, 20 million or something.
Yes, it is all interest, councillor. So there may be a tiny little bit of Bancorp costs and things like that, but they're tiny. It is literally all interest costs. Yeah.
I almost wonder if it shouldn't just be called interest. Then everybody, if somebody else comes along and reads it, they know what it means. Just a thought.
Thank you. Right, there being no further questions. Thank you, Mr. Wilson. So I'll ask for a mover for item 8. Please, Councillor Dixon, and a seconder. Councillor Hickey, looking at you. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Right, item 10, the last one on the agenda is the big kind of glossy report. So I think, Mr. Allen, you'll introduce that.
Through your chair, I guess we'll help council navigate our way through that document. I think the last meeting we had, it worked quite well just to work through each section, so we'll just do that. We only have one presentation through this as part of this, and it relates to the building control recovery project. So when we get to that section, we'll do a dive into that specifically, but otherwise we'll really just open it up for if there's any questions. So starting with the strategy and development group of activities, if there's any questions regarding those at this point.
Councillor Sholem.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, on Tomona Showgrounds, if I may start there. So I noted within the report that there's quite a bit of competition from local venues, which is potentially impacting revenue. And I was just interested in understanding any specific strategies we've got or we've been exploring to increase bookings at the showgrounds and address any underutilisation.
I can ask Mrs. Ferguson to answer that. Actually, if I could ask my lead team colleagues to come up in front so we can answer these questions more expeditiously. Sorry?
Through you, Chair. We have identified there is quite a bit of risk around at the moment in terms of a couple of pressures that are happening in that space, being the competition within this event space in Hastings District as well as the wider region, and also the economic pressures putting greater risk on event organisers in terms of, particularly as we're seeing, Hawke's Bay people particularly seem to be keen to be last minute ticket buyers. Maybe we've got too used to fair weather and we don't want to commit in case it might rain. But we are looking at ways to address that in terms of showcasing different uses of the venue. So we have ideas around some live music events that we'd like to see initiated. I'm also going to be meeting with the Hawke's Bay A&P Society to understand too their vision, because ultimately it's a fantastic venue for agricultural and horticultural events, and looking at what we can actively go out and either consider developing as a joint venture event, or in terms of just that visionary of how do we enable more activity in the space. We have also looked we have a relationship in the Equestrian Centre. We've recently held a workshop with representatives across the equestrian sector around their visions for the showgrounds. Now that is related to the master planning and that ultimately will become the reserve management plan. But from that, we're hoping to identify opportunities for equestrian events to increase the frequency of activity at the venue, even if it's smaller scale, but just getting that regular use.
A follow-up on that particular item, if I may. I also note in the report that it talks about the event management currently being absorbed by a HDC events team member. And I'm just interested in any updates on progress of trying to make a dedicated appointment for that facility, because I imagine that's impacting what work can be done in that space as well.
Through your chair, yes, we have developed at the moment a venue manager role, which is being funded from the existing budgets. We have been actually operating under budget in the staffing area while we understand what the needs of the venue are. That role will initially be 6 months fixed term contract to enable the trust to get established and set their vision, and also for us to identify that we have the skills right. The trust decision on the future of the grounds and how they want to see it used, and as well the master planning may inform what that role needs to look like in the long term, and the trust will ultimately want to appoint a person, make that appointment decision themselves.
No, that's great, thank you. Chair, I do have some other questions on other items, but I'm willing to let others go first if that's all right with you.
Yep, sure, if you're happy with that. Mayor Hazelhurst?
Thank you. Mine's also on the Tumwana Showgrounds. I think it's really important that we set a time for the reserve management plan rather than trying to meet with individual parties at the moment. The reserve management plan is going to be a community-led project that will identify the future of the Tumwana Showgrounds rather than us trying to identify its future. And, meeting with groups like last week, they've come to me already saying, this is what our aspirations, what are you going to do with that information? So I just think we have to be mindful we don't do this in isolation, and we have to actually set a time, set a budget, and say, when does the RMP get done? And that's the question really. Do we have that in any annual plan? The RMP?
We'd have to, I think they'd come back to you on that one,
Okay.
Sandra, I'm not sure of the answer to that.
Yeah, I just think that we've got, the RMP is going to set the direction to Tumwana Showgrounds, and so, I think it's really, just having heard from feedback from the meeting last week, people are excited about what it could be now, and then they think that, their time may have been spent, not wisely, because, so I just think that we have to set that our RMP, that's our Bible, our gospel, that will be our planning, our funding, that's what the RMP does.
So we'll take it as an action, Mayor Hazelhurst? Yep, thank you. Councillor Lawson?
Thank you, Chair. I just want to skip back one, climate action, carbon inventory. I just noted the financial opportunity if we have a climate action loan qualification. I just want to understand a little bit more about that. Is that an interest reduction overall borrowings from the LGFA, or how does that work?
Yeah, essentially it is a lower cost of borrowing that we are currently looking at. It comes with significantly additional reporting. So we're also looking at what are the requirements and are our systems able to actually cope with the additional reporting requirements that we need to then provide in order to get that and make that sustainable as well. So something I'm certainly working with the team here on and with the LGFA.
So when it talks about reduced interest rates, by, what sort of reduction is it? Do you know?
I need to come back on the specifics of that, because that will vary depending on essentially how much we are looking at and the extent of our programme.
Thanks for that.
Take that as an action as well, Councillor Lawson. Thank you. Yep. Part 2, Councillor Sholem.
Thank you,
Welcome.
Chair. And moving on to what my neighbour at the table will say is the centre of the universe, Pahara Kiki, that part of the report. I note in the report, and it's really great to see that it looks like the budget and timeline for infrastructure development seem really well aligned. But I also do note that it talks about a key risk being that the market valuations versus the LTP budgets. And I'm just really interested to understand, what are the contingency plans if that whole market conditions affect the projected land sales, if we can't get what we're hoping?
Through your chair, so I think effectively, so as you know, we're currently in the market to sell down the balance of the land that we have developed in Flaxmere around the town centre and Carnarvon Drive. The team are currently evaluating proposals received, and they'll be coming back to you later at the end of this month, I think, for decision. So I think, within that, there's an opportunity to assess the proposals that have been received, the financial elements of those proposals and how that aligns with budgets. Ultimately, it's council's decision as to whether they accept those proposals at that time or not, and wait. Just noting that by waiting, we continue to hold debt servicing costs associated with the money borrowed to enable those developments to occur. The sooner we get funds in to pay down those borrowings, the sooner that financing cost disappears in relation to those developments. So it'll be a balancing act when those proposals come to you later this month.
Thank you for that. If I may, Chair, carry on. Moving now to the business unit review. Looking at that, it looks like the unit's compliance rates are showing good performance, which is great to see. But I do see that it's identified risk is around workload increases, and I'm interested to understand how we
So
manage
maybe this is a good
that.
segue, Councillor, to the next section of the report.
Oh,
which
sorry.
is, planning and regulatory services. And I think it was-
Forgive me, I'm jumping all over the place
That's
here.
right. So if I, through you, Chair, if I could just, if Tony could just come up now. We've got a brief presentation just to take you through, I guess, the progress of the building review implementation plan and the work that the team has been doing to date.
Yep. Welcome, Tony.
Council.
Page 17, item 10.
Morning. So, excuse me, as well as what's written in your report there, I've got a presentation along, I guess, similar lines. But I think for the first part of it, I just want to cover off the first quarter in terms of building consents, and you will see up there, building consents accepted 275. This quarter is down from the previous quarter, 336. But value-wise, it's nearly 100 mil. I think the big difference here is Mainfreight was a big contributor to that 97 mil. They had a shed built down Ninegate for 22 million. But there is a slowdown in consents, and it's reflected in our workload. But average days, again, were pretty good, 11 days. Processing days. Might slightly, what I've got in there just may slightly differ from what's in your actual written report, but it's not too far out. Why it's different, I'm not quite sure, but it's there. Can we just go to the next page? Oh, I'm doing it, there you go. So instead of identifying and going through each of the 27 recommendations, basically what I've done is a lot of them are interrelated, so I've grouped them together, I guess to save a bit of time as well. But the business plan, that was one of the recommendations, and this was presented to the lead team. And the focus of the plan this financial year was the delivery of the implementation steps to meet the review. So that was the focus of the plan. Obviously, we can look at rewriting it closer to April, May next year for the next financial year. So that has been presented. In terms of progress with leadership and planning, so we had several courses that was run by Carly Sager.
Carly Price from Sager.
Carly Price, yeah, that's it, Carly Price. She ran several courses for us initially back in June, July. And then we went to attend a couple of courses with New Zealand business business training. So we've been on 2 courses with them. So we're pretty happy with going on the particular courses, and especially with Carly. She gave us a lot of focus and put us in the right direction in terms of the business plan as well. Again, individual recommendations was around, I guess, leadership and planning as well, and that related to individual staff, setting of objectives and priorities and KPIs, which all dovetailed into, I guess, performance. So staff now know expectations. We're able to monitor their performance through what we call Time Disciple. So, and they all understand their KPIs. These KPIs were set in June, beginning of the financial year, and we do another review. They review their staff KPIs in December So we're pretty happy there, and everyone's reaching that, I guess, that productivity stage. Leadership and development courses for managers and team leaders. I guess I've generally spoken about that already. Another recommendation was regular all team meetings. What we previously had was separate meetings for processors, separate meetings for inspectors, and separate meetings for some of the other team members. So what we've done, we've organised a all team meeting, and we had one at Waiaroha maybe 2 months ago. And we've got another one on the 4th of December. We intend running those probably 4 a year of good value. So was everyone participating, everyone, I guess, contributing to the meeting. And we were happy with the outcome, and that'll continue. If I flip over the page. So the next section is around, customer service and service delivery, which is the key priority, is delivering to the customer. We had some implementation of recommendations that have seen improvements. So what happened was, even before Mr. Palmer had, I guess, finished his review, and also before we even initiated our implementation steps, we had already, I guess, started looking at some of the recommendations we could do, look at some of the ways that we could improve the way we were processing and inspecting. And you would probably see back in the early stages, even before we completed our implementation steps, that the compliance and that the average working days was on track. And that's still the same today, I guess, even though admittedly the consents have slowed right down to, say, 6 months ago. Talking to customers, we've got people ringing them at the beginning of their consent. When the I guess staff pick up their consent, they give the customer a ring and basically say, look, I'm looking after your consent, I'll be processing it, any questions, give us a ring. And so it just starts that open line of communication between staff and customers. And then again, one of the recommendations was people ringing in and couldn't get hold of the staff member. So we have on our dashboard anything that's over 1 day where a customer's been waiting with CRMs. We make sure that we follow up on that, and essentially most if not all are answered within a day or two, getting back to customers. Again, just service delivery and customer service continued. Look, we're working towards meeting with key customers to further improve relationships. We've already started down that track, and a good example is Strata Group. One of the team leaders, and I'll be going along to the next meeting, is they have regular meetings with Strata Group, and Strata Group are looking after, I guess, commercially, they look after a wide range of the fruit industry and rocket apple, and some of the bigger commercial buildings. But in terms of that, again, we're getting one of the team leaders, as well as making this contact. It's a bit too, I think he's going to do a number of things for us. Matt Holmes, he's going to try and project where building is going in terms of resource consents once they're signed off. The big subdivision, so he'll ring the applicant to find out when is that, when's that subdivision going to commence. As big building consents come through, whether it's subdivision or commercial, he'll be contacting them to see, once the consent's approved, when is the actual building going to start. So he'll be doing all those sorts of things, as well as meeting with key customers. And once it's all organised, I'll go along with him. Digital dashboard, so pretty much on the team leader's screen is an up-to-date version of productivity, and I wish I'd shown you a copy, but it's got productivity, staff members for the previous week, how much work they've done in terms of consents. It's got CRMs where people are ringing in and they want a customer to phone them back. It shows who the customer is and who the building officer is, so that they can keep an eye on it, especially the team leaders. And there's a number of items on that dashboard, and I'll bring it along next time. We'll certainly put put it up there. Scheduling of inspections was another big recommendation, and we've done a lot of things there and still doing a number of things there in terms of what, and I don't know whether I mentioned to you last time, but we had a map system which we never utilised, and when you go along and book an inspection, we get a map and it will show that Inspector George Astridge is going north past North Shore up there. He's going there. It'll show like he's booked in for tomorrow, and the next day it'd show him going there. But also what was happening was another inspector would be booked at the same area around the same time, and so essentially what they do, the inspector team leader, he'll look at this map for tomorrow, and you can see why is two different inspectors being booked out there or at Waimarama. So he quickly changes it around, and so that's a big saving there in terms of inspections. Also, what I found was sometimes they were booking 2 hours. A final inspection takes 2 hours. It's booked for 2 hours, and it does take 2 hours when you've got a big inspection in terms of new dwellings. But some of those inspections were for fairly minor building works, which should have only taken half an hour now. So we've made sure that we get those scheduled properly. Then carrying on down there, you would see through our, I guess, that weekly data that compliance, I think I've got there, it's 91% compliance with 20 days. That's over the last quarter. 0 time, waiting dates for inspections, recording compliments, again, average days to process. The consent is 11 days, and improved productivity. Regional collaboration was another recommendation. Obviously, we had the Napier and Hastings and Central Development Forum a couple of months ago in Napier. But what our guys are also, they've got a meeting with the processing and inspection team in Napier this week. We had a meeting with, we regularly deal with Central. So in terms of collaboration, we're on the right track. One thing I haven't put on my slide there, but it's in the actual, your bigger booklet, is risk-based consenting. There's 3 parts to it. One is where there was legislation passed back in 2014, where legislation passed for risk-based consenting. But what happened was that legislation was never enacted. In other words, it was sitting dormant, I guess, for the last 10 years, sitting there. So what the CEO, Nigel, and also Mr. Dave Kelly, who does a lot of work for us, Dave Kelly, they together wrote to Minister Pence saying, how about we enact that risk-based consent process, low risk, which was just sitting there. And I spoke to Dave Kelly the other day, and he's coming here to talk about the Development Forum, and you would have seen a lot of legislation changes across the building field coming from the government. And Dave Kelly, there was, the government are looking at risk-based processing, and part of the reason they're looking at that is because of the letter that Nigel and Dave Kelly sent to him a couple of months ago. So that's happening. Also, in terms of risk-based consenting, we've looked at a couple of models throughout New Zealand, what other councils do. We specifically looked at Selwyn. They had one 3 or 4 years ago. It dropped off the radar for whatever reason. Things weren't happening. They're just starting to reintroduce it or relook at it. So that's something we're going to consider. But the risk-based, the biggest thing we're doing here is just looking at the way we do our stuff internally in terms of whether,
thanks, Tony. I think, is that great? We'll just go on to Councillor Harvey.
Yeah, thank you. And it's looking great that the plan is in action. That's awesome. I just wanted to know, what would you see as being the greatest success of the implementation so far that will have a positive impact for clients?
there's a couple of things, and one is productivity. Until Mr. Palmer came along and reviewed it and gave us an example of productivity, I actually didn't know what productivity looked like or how it was measured. And that was partly due to, obviously, the cyclone. We were consumed by the cyclone for a year. But got an understanding of how productivity worked down there and how it should work. And so essentially what we're asking our staff is, you should be working on consents for 65% of your time. The remaining 35% is made up of admin, training, competency, etc. So understanding that, and I guess informing the staff of productivity and what expectations were. That's a big thing for me. And just those inspections was a big thing for me, as well as just, he highlighted the fact that we actually, just that example I gave in terms of the mapping, because I don't think it was being looked at properly there. So those two things are pretty huge.
Yep, thank you. And just one other, have you also noticed sort of, and look, we're not inside the unit itself ourselves, but has the culture also improved, or is it on a journey of improving based on the plan?
Yeah, no, it's definitely on the journey to improve. Are we there? Not quite, I don't think. There's still a way to go, but certainly it's improved, and everyone understands where we're sitting in terms of the review and how we got to get there.
Thank you. Yep, thank you, Councillor Hubby. Mayor Hazelhurst.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Thank you, Tony, for your report and the work that's been undertaken through the review. Can I just ask a question about the government moving to considering streamline building consenting? Have we identified the builders, the group house builders that could be moving towards this, and the implications it's going to have to this organisation?
Haven't specifically spoken to certain groups about it, but it's your usual GJ Gardner, those types of franchise builders. My plan was to wait till Mr. Kelly came up and get his views, because he's always recommending those franchise builders such as GJ Gardner, Jenny Ann Homes, and all those sorts of things would be who you want to start with to put, I guess, a process in place as to how you fast track their consent. Plus the fact we went down, had a look down in Selwyn at what they're doing, which is they're just redeveloping it. But and I guess we haven't approached anyone as yet.
All right, no, I'd just be interested if we had some data around the group home builders and the work that, the resource that it takes for us to to consent now, and what the streamlining legislation could impact on this organisation. So I think, yes, Mr. Kelly is probably good now if we could take that chair through as an action.
Sure, we'll call that as an action. Thank you, Mayor Hazelhurst. Yep, Councillor Montepeto Hendry.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Tony, for your report, and obviously the leaps and bounds that the department's gone through. I understand there's two different departments. So you've got your building and consenting and the officers, and then for placarded homes, just because we still are in a recovery space, they're under a total different territorial authority. And I know that if a building inspector goes out, they'll know if it's a placard home, hopefully, and the recovery team will know that they have a placard home. Do you guys have a face-to-face here? So if a placard homeowner comes in for a building consent, that consent officer will go down the hallway or pick up the phone and go, "Oh, hey, Frank, just letting you know I've got a yellow placard come in." Don't send them an email to say, "Where are you at?" or vice versa. Just because West Hawke's Bay is so small, I know that's a lot, but just in that customer service realm, do we have anything there?
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure, but generally when someone picks up a consent, they'll ring them, and they should know at the time whether it's placarded. Yeah, I'm not 100% sure.
Could we please look at that and just see say if a consent officer gets a placarded home, if it could please go to the recovery team and go, hey, I've just got this consent come through?
I think what happens is, when the consent is approved a couple of weeks later, I think we talk to William after it's been approved, but I'll double check on that.
Yeah,
Thank you.
we'll take that as an action thank you. So being no more questions, thank you, Mr. Monanu, and I think I speak on behalf of us. I think one word to describe you would be conscientious in the way that you've just embraced this and taken it very seriously, and it's good to see, as others have said, the results that are starting to come through. So thank you for your mahi in this area. Thanks, Tony.
Right, thanks, Tony. Moving to the Community Wellbeing and Services Group. Ms. Dinwoody is here to answer all of your questions that you may have.
Right. Councillor Sholem?
Thank you, Chair. In this section, I have a few questions as well, but I'm happy to make way for other councillors as we go along. Looking first to senior housing, please. I note in the report that we've just recently done a audit of the register of names of people looking for senior housing, and I see the number has significantly reduced for our wait list, and I was just wondering whether or not there's any intention to do that periodically, just so we've got a really good snapshot of what the demand actually is, because we often use wait lists around this table as a bit of an indication of how our community's doing and where we need to put things.
Through you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor. Yes, absolutely. We've now got it on the work plan to do at least every 3 years. Yes.
If I may, another question. So not on senior housing this time, moving on to the community development section. I chair the Multicultural Advisory Group who met yesterday, and they're very concerned with the update that the Welcoming Communities funding will cease next year, which impacts the role that enables a lot of the connection, I think, between council and our varied communities. And I'm just really interested to understand what is the planning around that right now, because I guess what I'm bringing to the table is some serious concerns from that group.
Through you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Sholem. Yes, it is challenging. We were, for the councillors that aren't aware, we were funded by Immigration New Zealand for 3 years for a staff member. That funding ceases in June 2025, so there is no funding in the LTP after that time. The team are currently working through what of the role can be picked up by the wider community connected team, but that certainly is a work in progress. But unfortunately, yes, the external funding stops. We have had conversations about whether we can continue to get that external funding for a period of time, and the answer was no.
Okay, so just to follow up through you, Chair, is there an action we can take away from this? I guess I'm just very concerned that doesn't disappear into the ether.
Yes, certainly through you, Chair. I mean, so, like I said, the team are sort of trying to work out how we can allocate work to the other community connectors. But as you know, that's not ideal because they already have a full work load themselves. I guess this isn't helpful, but it just adds to the problem is that we have some community connectors that are currently externally funded. We got the external funding as a result of the cyclone, so we will be reducing community connector numbers too. And so, yes, this is a challenge for the work going forward, and there may be a reduction in level of service.
I'd like to be kept very much abreast of that if possible. Moving on through you, Chair, just to another section of the community development. I noted that it talks about the development of a community development 5-year action plan and that's commenced. And I was just wondering, what are the KPIs? What are we measuring? I just wanted a little more info on that if that's possible.
Yes, through you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Sholem. So it's a work in progress, that action plan. So the team, obviously, after the cyclone, they've been quite reactive in terms of their work over the last 18 months. And so this plan is being put in place to make sure they've got a good forward thinking work plan for the next few years. In terms of KPIs, they're still being developed. We'd welcome any suggestions, but possible KPIs could be, for example, the number of community hubs established, the number of resilience plans completed, how we're establishing the network of community emergency hub leaders, the number of reference groups that we're working with, so that there's lots of kind of options. But I guess the qualitative measures should also be considered to represent the connections and relationship building that's crucial to the community development activity as well. So there should be those qualitative and quantitative KPIs.
Thank you. Through you, Chair, I'm happy to wait to ask further questions after. Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just a question regarding CCTV cameras. I see there's been 17 new cameras in the last quarter. Do we have any cameras at Stortford Lodge in the areas that we've been talking about recently?
Through you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor. I'm sorry, I'm not an expert on where all the CCTV cameras are, but I do know we've certainly got one on the roundabout there at Stortford Lodge that does 360. That has quite a lot of capability in terms of number plate recognition, for example. I don't believe we've got any on that Stortford Street, which is the area where we've currently got the challenge with homeless.
I think that would be useful if we just considered that. Thank you.
So do you want that as an action to consider that? Yeah, we'll call that as an action. Thank you. Councillor Sholem.
Thank you, Chair. Moving on to neighbourhood support. I noted in the report that we've got increasing numbers, particularly in rural areas, which is fabulous. But I guess what I wanted to understand and have assurance around is that we're resourced well enough to cater for this increased demand, which I see is quite important in terms of maintaining resilience in the community.
Through you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor. As you're aware, we have one neighbourhood support officer. Neighbourhood support, though, its success is really dependent on the neighbourhood person, which is a voluntary position that takes the lead on this. So it's a very much a community input needed to make this successful. So we have some, great examples of neighbourhood support volunteers that run the support. We provide all the resources, for example, things that they can use along with police and FENS. So we've got quite a group of people that work with the neighbourhood. But it is all about connection. So it's not, going back to your KPI question, it's all about not the number of neighbourhood support groups that we've got, but how connected those neighbourhoods are. We are actually looking at a system, because currently we work off a database, a very manual database, and therefore our neighbourhood support people in the community use that too. It's quite clunky and it takes time, tricky. So we are looking at potentially a system to enable us to manage these neighbourhood support groups much better, and actually could be used, the neighbourhood support people in the communities could use it too. So, for example, is able to manage the connections much more easily, do newsletters, things like that. So although there would be a bit of work to get it set up and clean the data, I think long term that would be good and a cheap way, or a cheaper way than people resourcing of managing it going forward.
Through you, Chair, if I may. Moving on to youth employment. Well, this section was a bit of grim reading. And I guess the thing that I'm interested to understand is, in the report it talks about, we've got cases where even experienced rangatahi are really struggling to get callbacks. And I'm interested to understand feedback from the team. Is there anything else we could be doing in this space? Also recognising our constrained fiscal environment and that we've had to pare back in all areas, what we could be doing to help.
Through you, Chair, thank you, Councillor. We're quite lucky. It's an externally funded contract, and we can have an employment outcome, or we can have sort of training and education outcome. So we are quite lucky in comparison to other providers. So when these times come where employment is difficult, there's a number of things we can do. firstly, we can work with Orangatahi about actually, have they considered all the careers that might be of interest to them? Sometimes they come in with quite a focus, so we really try to expose them to different career options, especially if we think the likelihood of getting a job in a different area is more promising. So that might include making sure they've got the right sort of training and education to get into this other career. We've also been spending quite a bit of time doing site visits to different industries, again, just to sort of broaden their view of what careers are available to them. So we use those opportunities, so making sure they know all the different careers that's available, and if they can't get a role, putting them into some training or education to assist for the future.
Fabulous, thank you.
Right. Thank you, Ms Dinwoodie. Thank you.
So moving on to asset management, Chair, it starts on page 45 of that document. So any questions, comments on that activity? Or Mr Thu?
No? Yes, there is. Councillor Dixon?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just it came up at the recent crematorium meeting, the pressure that's actually going on our staff. People are struggling to afford funerals. They're taking the bodies to the crematorium and asking them to process them. And there's a huge amount of paperwork that needs to go alongside it, which we need to find some form of funding for. But it's something that's happening out there that's never used to happen in the past, and Craig might want to add to that.
Through you, Chair. Yes, thank you, Councillor Dixon. Through the Joint Crematorium Committee with the team, Isaac and Sonia just raised this growing issue. What we've committed to do is we've set up an additional crematorium committee in the new year for two key reasons. One is to consider how we may price for this activity. And what we're seeing is two parts. One, people skipping funeral directors out just to save significant funds and just paying for a straight cremation, because a cremation is somewhere just under $1,000. Obviously, a funeral, your down payments may be closer to 4 to 5 before you do anything after that. We're also seeing a behaviour, particularly from out of town, of funeral directors where perhaps the deceased was in Auckland, worked with a funeral director up there. They do part of the paperwork and then send the family down, and the team end up having to look after that family in very short time frames, which just consumes time. So we are just looking at a few processes, approaches. The other key piece, which is a significant impact for consideration by the Crematorium Committee, is with the consolidation or purchase of a number of the local funeral directors by an Australian-owned company, Propel. The full expectation is they will start their own cremator, which in many operational perspectives is awesome because we were getting close to our consent limit. But what that potentially will do will halve our revenue, because the 3 funeral directors represent close to 50% of our revenue. So that means looking at our fixed cost, our variable costs, and therefore what would be an updated charge, and doing some benchmarking across the country around what charges are. So that's work that's probably the heaviest piece of lifting the Crematorium Committee will be working through. The crematorium operation needs to operate rates, zero rate input. So that'll be a key item that'll feed through that committee.
Thank you, Mr Thu. Councillor Sholem?
Thank you. Looking at the Puketapu Park remediation, I just noted in the report that it talked about, we've got a mix of local community volunteers, contractors, the Hawke's Bay Regional Council, Hastings District Council, and I'm just wanting to understand how all these parties are coming together, and we're going to get a good outcome and hopefully a sustainable outcome in terms of future weather events.
Thank you, Councillor, through you, Chair. Yes, it's great that all those groups are working together, and for those councillors that don't know and may not have been on the real bus tour when we drove past, half of that reserve is actually regional council land, half is ours, and in the future there's some talk around transferring some land we own further down the road to join up. In terms of the work that the team have been doing in terms of restoring it, the pathway, which is now constructed, which when this report was being written was underway, that's a concrete path, not a limestone. So in many respects, that would last better with floodwaters across. I think, though, what we have to be really, really careful about is to pretend that we can build toilet blocks and playground features and safety surfaces that will survive an event at the scale of Cyclone Gabrielle. Ideally, the river doesn't hop outside the stop banks very often. There are items, that the council need to work through in its policy settings around how resilient you want different types of infrastructure in different locations. And I think one in this, if you take that parks area where we have hazard areas, what's the nature of investment, what's the life of that investment? So for example, if you take the coastal hazards, which we know in many years to come we need to move away from, if you're putting in something that lasts 5 to 10 years, you could most likely confidently put it back where it is. But if it was something that was going to last longer, we need to ask questions, where's the right place to put it? The work that's gone on at Puketapa, I think, is fair and appropriate given the remaining risks that exist here.
No, that's great. Moving on to another section now, if we can move on to the Hastings City Centre, please. Looking at the Hastings City Centre mall upgrade, the report talks about the design work progressing well in conjunction with Kiwi Rail's safety improvements that they are imposing upon us. And I guess, but I also note under risk and opportunities, it talks about the funding yet to be confirmed around that. And I just am looking for a board update, please, because that's such a core key part of our city centre.
Through you, Chair, it's been something we've been chasing as well. And just this week, we've had confirmation from Kiwi Rail. They have confirmed they'll have budget available in next financial year for construction, and they've made budget available to do the detailed design work of their parts as it may relate to our parts. And Ms. Stewart is looking at setting up a workshop time just to talk through what those options are in terms of the interplays and the work we'll be doing with Kiwi Rail around what they will put in as a base minimum. And I think you may have seen some stuff a long, long time back, just where some of those conversations have got to. We brought senior officials from Kiwi Rail into town around some of those gates, steps in and out and ramps that they were proposing, and they've come work with Ms. Stewart and her team around some alternatives. And then obviously that all relates to the water fountain and the need for renewals of that feature as well. So we'll be looking to bring something back to you as soon as we can find a session. Ms. Stewart was here to be able to answer in more detail, but she had to leave to another meeting.
Thank you.
So but just to confirm, this year is design, and partly that also for Kiwi Rail, there's really long lead times for them for their equipment in terms of coming in.
Thank you. Councillor Harvey?
Yeah, thank you. Just following on from that, do we have any idea of when it could be installed?
Next financial year.
Well,
I don't have a date beyond that at the moment, sorry.
So July?
From July on, we'd be pushing, although given it was an urgent issue for them last financial and then they didn't deliver it and they lost the money this year, it's back into an urgent issue in their next budget year. So I would assume, given them doing the early design work and lead times, it could be a July, August. But a key piece, we'd want to have a discussion with them alongside the business association. When's the right time to do that construction to minimise the effect on the CBD as well?
Thank you. And you just mentioned the workshop. Will we be shown at that stage what the design options actually are?
That's the full intent, is to work through some of the options, the discussions we've put to them, what they've come back to of what they're not willing to do, and what we think is a workable option to get your the council's view and where to play. You still obviously have an option just to do the very bare minimum, or to do the work that you've previously highlighted, or something along those lines.
Councillor Apatui?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If I could just ask about CEPTED principles being adopted with urban design or a city centre, particularly around lighting. There's been quite a lot of mention of safety, feeling unsafe, especially after dark.
Yep. You'd like to answer that one, that lighting.
Without being specifically over the exact details you're referencing, typically, if we work through both in public spaces, both in the roadway and parks area, where we're doing audits through, then we'll actually go out and measure the lux levels. It can be as simple as trees getting too big and creating shadowing, and we just need to do some branch trimming, as different to a few $1,000s here, there for light posts. So it's, I think, apart from periodic audits, it's actually responding to questions and inquiry and the work that we do with Clint's team with the security cameras and also the discussions we have with the police.
Councillor Watkins?
Thank you, Chair. Just following on from that, over the years we've spent tens of thousands of dollars trying to light up the central area in the CBD, around the fountain and the trees, and none of it's worked. It's a black hole in there and people won't come into town, they won't walk in there, they bypass it. So if you're going to light it up, damn well light it up. Don't play around with fairy lights.
Thank you, Councillor Watkins. Did you want a response to that? You've made.
So maybe just if I do build on that, thank you, Councillor Watson, and fully understand that. But I think we seriously have to do that in that combination with that is think about constraint with the level of foliage, because some of those trees severely limit the effectiveness of light. Also cause some real issues with pipe work for drainage, which we've come to learn more of recently around our fountain. So I think it's both the planting layout and the level of lighting in there.
Yep, that's great. Corporate services?
Yep. On page 67.
Yep.
Through you,
Yeah,
Chair, just
Hazel
before we
Hurst,
move on to corporate services, can I just acknowledge the stunning work that has been undertaken by our roading team and the renewals by our contractors, the quality, the levels of service, the work that has been done to engage with the community. It's just exceptional, and I just want to acknowledge the team who have worked so hard in those areas with both the recovery work but also the renewals that are happening at the moment, and just out and about driving around and seeing them and just seeing the high level of quality. It's fantastic. So that's page 66. I'm really impressed. Thank you.
Yep, thank you, Mayor Hayes. I think we should actually record that in the minutes, actually, as a, yep, so, thank you. Corporate services? Any questions? Yep.
Couple of typos in the digital communications in the top line there. Current versus previous quarter. 42,000 versus 341,000. I think it should be 41,000 on page 76.
Yep, thank
Agree with
you,
that one?
noted, thank you.
And just another one on the eyesight, again on the top line on tickets. I can't understand why an increase in ticket sales shows a little red arrow pointing down on the top line. I think that's just another oversight. It should be a green.
Oops, I think we're into the next section, so we can look at that market comms, so yep. Right. Thank you, Councillor Watkins. Councillor Sholem?
Just a really quick question in our IMBT section. I noted in the report it talks about the team being excited to start the move of the finance module, which is the first one that needs to move to the cloud. And having this IT background, just very interested to understand what plans are in place if that transfer doesn't go well.
Yeah, through you, Chair, and on behalf of Warren Perry, our CIO, I think that project is like we're building resources internally to support it. We've got a full-time project manager on board. We've got a full-time change manager now on board for that project. We've been having regular meetings with Technology One, including their New Zealand manager and myself as part of that team. That's been going well. We've already seen a shift and an improvement in engagement on their side and the quality of resources that are being offered up to support our program of work from them. So I think in the most recent time, we've seen some quite significant improvements in that. Our project manager, Marie, is getting very clear around all the phases of the project as it works its way through, ensuring it's both on both sides. So for us, for council and with Technology One, we have the necessary resources in place as we move our way through. Because this is a multi-year project. First phase is moving our finance module up to the cloud and onto the newest and best of their versions. And that'll be followed by our property and rating module, which I guess is the biggest part of it. So that's that holds all of our property information. All of our the 32,000 properties that we have in our district. It captures all that information. It manages all the regulatory processes that we have from resource consents, building consents, and integrates with a number of other software solutions as well. So that's the biggest part, and that's probably a year or two piece of work. It's a massive change for the organisation as we work our way through. So it's a really, thank you for your question. This project for me comes with enormous risk, and that's risk from a scope perspective. It's risk from financial. It's risk in time. It's something we have to do. We have no choice, and we're moving forward, resourcing ourselves the best that we can to minimise risk on our side, building those relationships with our provider, enhancing the relationships with our supplier to ensure that we can manage those risks going forward. Though I think the biggest thing with all of this is around scope and ensuring that that's well managed as we'll go way through it, because that scope is what's going to drive, as you know, the biggest financial risk and the biggest time risk as well.
Absolutely. Through you, Chair, thank you for that, and it's really great to hear you with that focus on scope, because you're right, that's where everything blows out if we don't have that right. And I am aware that council's got quite tailored, customised package right now. Interested to understand as well, and this could be taken offline, we don't have to consume time now, just the plans in place in terms of mitigating disruption. If things don't go as planned, how are we going to make sure, particularly in the transition of financial modules and regulatory information, that there's not an impact on service delivery as a result of something not going as we hope?
Through Chair, I think maybe it'd be quite a good, what I'll do is I'll organise for you, if there's anyone else that's interested as well, to sit down with Warren Perry and Marie Golding, our project manager. Maybe they can step you through what we're doing in that space to provide that assurance.
Thank you, and very much still trying to keep a high level governance focus, but that would be wonderful. Thank you.
Is this possible, a risk and assurance?
Yes,
item as well?
we have this as a standing item on risk and assurance as well going forward.
Yeah. Cool. Right, page 74, marketing and comms. Any questions relating to marketing and comms? Ms Ferguson is primed and waiting. Councillor Harvey, Councillor Sholem, sorry.
Councillor Harvey can go first.
Okay,
No, by all means.
Sholem? Oh, so who's going to go first? Councillor Harvey, I'll make a decision. There you go.
Thank you. Just in relation to My Hastings, and you say in the report that there's a cost of that of $5,500 per issue, and it's unbudgeted. So are you saying that you haven't got or signed, because obviously you've got an overall budget, but there's been a decision not to include that? Just trying to understand the weighing up of that, please.
So when we were asked to put forward our budget sacrifices, that went up as one, and there was a miscommunication around the direction given, that there was a comfort that that wasn't continued, so the budget was removed. So the budget, that was the, and then obviously the council said, no, that was a mistake and please continue to deliver it. So that is continuing to be delivered, but the funding was removed from it. There is no capacity elsewhere in the budget in terms of what else we can turn off to cross-fund that. However, the team are taking an approach that we don't invest, like if there are opportunities for savings, then we'll take them from other budget areas to cover off that additional cost. So our aim is still to deliver within budget, but there is a risk that should other activities still need to be delivered against that budget, that we will be over budget for that.
Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to go back one step and then also with what is the strategic risk register, and one of the ones that's extreme is truth decay. And so just that correlation between the two and just the weighting that we give to particular comms and the engagement. So it'll be good to, maybe it's something offline to have a conversation about this, but yeah.
Councillor Harvey, is happy to have an offline with the election? Fantastic. Councillor Sholem?
Last question. I saw under, sorry, I'm just finding the right section, digital communications, under risks and opportunities, it talked about how we're finding it challenging engaging younger parts of our community, and that there's a suggestion around exploring channels like TikTok, but there's just not resource available right now. And I was just wondering if you could elaborate a little bit more on what we can do in that space, because I just want to make sure we're not, I understand we're stretched at the moment, but want to not leave out our younger people who we do have identified in our youth strategy, as well as having poor engagement with us at a local government level.
So through you, Chair, yeah, we've talked at length about TikTok, and unfortunately the average age in our office, I think, is not going to be able to develop the appropriate content to hit that audience we need. So, and of course a new channel does require a lot of content, particularly TikTok, as content creation and capacity. So, but it is something I'm really keenly aware of, and it's part of it sits in the back of my mind to look for opportunities. So one of the ones that has sprung up is obviously the election time next year. So we have, I've had an initial conversation just scoping around an agency around what a youth targeted campaign would look like. Again, but it feels like a bit of a broken record. Budget constraint may be the issue with that, but it's something that we can put together in the plan as an option. I think looking at how we can use the Youth Council and their channel that they have to better, use their knowledge and reach, I guess, is to reach that further. We have an idea, and again, it's ideas are plenty, capacity is the limit, I really feel there's an opportunity in that civics education space, because I think part of it is getting people to see there's a place for them to care about local government elections. And we have, as we've seen with our local youth council, some amazing young people who are leaders at the youth space who, youth are a wonderful place because they're really optimistic, I think, and they're very, visionary, and they sort of can bring that view of what the future is that they want to see. And so I really do value that, and looking for ways that we can get that. It doesn't have to be through engaging on social media. The biggest challenge, obviously, Facebook was that space, and then it's gone, but it's also representing a really big rate-paying majority, so we don't want to take away from that. But it is around understanding, and I think that's something we need to do better with the Youth Council around how they can, what they would like to see us doing, and then how can we prioritise if we can't do it all, what's the main thing for us. So it's definitely an area that is on our radar, is one that needs strengthening without adding resource and budget.
Okay, it'll be interesting to stay and play with that. Thank you.
Councillor Harvey?
Yeah, just wanted to pass on to your team how awesome Taste Hastings was as an event, and the whole place was a buzz with people, and your team were going the extra, doing the hard yards for it. So well done.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Harvey, and thank you. Yep, fantastic. Recovery, last, at least. Anybody want to? It's just a bit of a one pager, but
that's right. It's just a little one pager on that, given that there's a more substantive report that goes to Strategy and Recovery Committee.
Yep, Councillor Kerr.
I'm not sure if this is the right place to ask, but I have been challenged on this. Cyclone damaged properties, category 3, for example, have been allowed to have rates remission for up to 2 years. The question is, their land value is, in their view, permanently impaired. When is the next revaluation for the Hastings district, which would potentially give them relief with their devaluation of their property compared to the rest of the district?
So the next revaluation process will be undertaken next year. with the valuation date was 1st of August. So that's the but that won't come into effect until the following financial year.
Therefore, can I just pick up once again offline a conversation around those particular properties that effectively are permanently devalued because they can no longer reside on their property? I don't know what the answer is, but I just think we need to explore.
Yeah, I think it's appropriate for an offline because, for that particular one, thank you, Councillor Kerr. Any sort of light flashing? No last questions on recovery. So I think we're at the end of the. Oh, sorry. Mayor Hazelhurst.
Thank you. Through you, Chair, can I just acknowledge the community resilience team and the amazing mahi of standing up all those hubs and the ones to come. It is absolutely exceptional to go out into the communities and see the ownership of the community with the resilience hubs. And I just want to acknowledge Bex's team for that work. You know, we've talked about this through CEDAM for years. We're just getting on and doing it. And we've got leaders in each area, we've got the funding, we've got the delivery of the equipment, and it's really exciting to see this work happening and Hastings owning it for our people. So well done to the team. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And could we record that in the minutes? Yeah. That'd be great. Thank you. Councillor Kerr?
I'd like to support that as well, and the magic of the right people supporting the right communities. That's the piece that Bex, through you and your team, have done really, really well. And to hear the community speak of their connectors as now part of us. They are now part of our community and will be forever, is a very magic and special thing to hear. So, yeah, congratulations. Thank you.
Yep, thank you, Councillor Kerr. Item 10, could I please have a mover? Councillor Sholem, yes. And Councillor Watkins. All those in favour say aye. Against? Carried. So there's no minor or urgent items, but I'd just like to say thank you to all those that have been involved with the reports. We've had some pretty robust discussions today, and I have to say as chair that our organisation, considering the challenges of the cyclone and all the other and staff are under great pressure, that we have given them some good discussion and we're in pretty good heart. So I think that really reflects upon the leadership and the staff at all levels. So I think on behalf of us councillors, we thank you for your mahi in that area. So thank you. And what I'd like to do now, I'm looking at you, please, councillor, because Councillor Hickey had to go to an appointment at 12 o'clock. So if you close with a karakia, please, Councillor Jessup.
Kia tau, kia tātou katoa, te ata whae o tō tātou āriki a iwi krati. Te aroha o te atua, me te whiwhinga tahitanga ki te wairoa tapu. Ake. Āmine.
Yep. And thank you for those that watched on live stream. If you've watched the whole lot, I think you deserve to go and buy yourself a chocolate fish for stability. So thank you for joining us if you've lasted the distance. And for Christine and Caitlin for your help today and Louise. Thank you.